latest episode of The Claus Corner. Today's guest is an artistic director, event creator, absurd artist, improv specialist, singer, meditation leader, writer, and founder and director of Athan Phynix Productions. You can see him at the Mediator Stage in Providence, Rhode Island, as he conducts his weekly spiritual hour from 1 to 2 p.m. Please welcome the extremely talented and versatile Athan Phynix to The Claus Corner. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Rich, so much for having me at The Claus Corner.
Oh, yeah, it's a good place to be. So I've known you probably since 2014, 2015, when I began doing comedy. And I met you at an open mic in Massachusetts somewhere. No, Rhode Island somewhere. I did an open mic and you were there doing your comedian slash absurd art. What would you call yourself? Because I gave you 5 or 6 different titles. If you had to pick one title, what would you consider yourself?
Wow. You did a great job, by the way, with the intro. It made me sound so good. I was like, who is that guy? Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. But I would lately, I think it was about 2013, I started calling myself an absurdist. And that's because I had so many absurd, long-winded titles. I started off as a comedian, and I, like you, was going to anywhere in New England, anywhere I could go to do an open mic, and that's how we met, and it was great. And but back then, I was a comedian, and then I said I was a improv comic, and then I said I was an improvisational performer or an improv performer, and then I was like, I'm an improvisationalist, and so I've just tried so many long-winded, pretentious titles that I just said, I'll just be an absurdist. So that's usually what I get introduced as. They're like, Athan Phynix, the absurdist. But then they go, comedian.
So when you first started out, when you were younger, did you always want to be a comedian or did you just want to be an entertainer?
I would say that I was very ambitious as a kid because I was raised on Walt Disney films, Jim Henson's Muppets.
Yes.
I had to listen to on the way to, so I went to a private Christian school that said rock music was evil, but we were raised on the Beatles, Elvis Presley, Freddie Mercury. So I always loved rock and roll and music. So I just wanted to do it all, be an entertainer, be a comedian, be a singer.
I want to go through all the different things that you have done, but let's start with, because in the background, I see this, and I know it has something to do with the weekly spiritual hour, which I mentioned in the intro. Tell me about that.
So, like I was saying, I was raised in a private Christian school for 9 years, and both my parents felt it was really important to instill those Christian values, and but then I was in a public school starting in 8th grade, and I was introduced to friends who were like, well, I'm Buddhist, or I'm atheist, or I'm agnostic, or I'm Jewish. And so I was really exposed to world religions. And also then I had a really good friend who was a neighbor of mine who became a spiritual teacher. He taught me about Taoism and Hinduism, Buddhism, Tantra. So it really put me on a spiritual journey, being both in the public school system and having that friend Mitch. And so I was able to, I hate to use the word evolve, but I guess it is the best word, grow and evolve, become more spiritual instead of just religious, and be more open-minded towards all these different belief systems.
So that led to what you do now, years later, the weekly spiritual hour. What does that entail?
So, great question. So I started meditating at 12 years old due to my parents sent me to therapy because they thought I was too sensitive. And they thought I was too sensitive. So they sent me. They didn't go to therapy, but they sent their loving son to therapy at 12 years old. And the therapist started teaching me meditation. And I said, I can't meditate because I've got so many brain, hyperactivity, because that was remember that was really in the 90s. Everyone had ADHD.
I know.
but they forced me to, because I talk a mile a minute, one of my heroes being Robin Williams. I just love to talk. And so they would force me to sit and close my eyes and basically force me to learn how to meditate, 10 seconds, then 20 seconds, and 30 seconds. And then also that father figure and friend, Mitchell, he also encouraged me to meditate. And because of that, that's how I ended up at the Unitarian Universalist Church in East Greenwich. And I joined their committee of open-minded people who would create a more modern or more contemporary service, right? Where there's, say, a blessing that's Buddhist, but then next week there might be, the whole theme might be Jewish. And so it was really very open-minded and exposes people to religions and philosophies from all over the world. And because I was involved with that church for 12 years, I started running a meditation program at the Community College of Rhode Island. And then I found a smaller Unitarian church in Providence, and I was running a meditation program for them on Tuesday. And then, as you know, I just started living out of my backpack, going to open mics all over the West Coast and East Coast. So I abandoned my spirituality for a while because I would just travel with my singing bowl here. And but then I found my way back to Rhode Island, and I was offered this job of running a weekly service since last April to help people center themselves. So regardless of whether you feel atheist or Buddhist or Christian and Jewish, whatever, it doesn't really matter who you are. What matters is that you come and you're willing to listen to the bowl and sit for a while, silence yourself, quiet, go within, basically.
I love that, because I think there's so many people that live in a bubble and they only want to be around like-minded people, and they're so afraid of hearing something new or trying something new. And I love the fact that you expose people to so many different types of ways of life. And I think it makes you a better, more knowledgeable, more open-minded person if you're open to new things and not fearing the unknown. And so I love the fact that you bring all of this in a spiritual type of way where people can come from 1 to 2. Now, where is this located?
The Mediator Fellowship is in Providence, Rhode Island at 50 Rounds Avenue. For those who are familiar with Rhode Island, we're not too far from the Roger Williams Park Zoo in a residential neighborhood. It's actually funny because I never knew it was there until 2011 when a musician buddy was featuring at their Thursday night weekly open mic. And I was like, because it's right, you've been there. It's
I've been there plenty of times.
Neighborhood, beautiful building, 180 years old.
What's the history of it?
So my friend and, Don Tisoni, who's a friend of yours now as well, he loves telling the story. So I hope I do it justice, but.
Make him proud.
Yes, I'll do my best. I've heard him tell it a million times, hopefully. So there's this business. I don't know. Maybe they make steeples? And he'll laugh at me when he hears this retelling, because I'm sure he'll listen. But so 180 years ago, the neighborhood was empty. And they were hiring some workers to come move into the neighborhood and build, the community up. But they wanted to build a church, but they didn't know if these workers were Jewish, Catholic, Buddhist. So they built a generic building that they felt could be a house of worship and a community center where people could go to do community meetings. And so, yeah, it's been so many things before the Unitarians took it over. And I believe maybe 1976, it's been a Jewish synagogue. It's been a Christian church. It's been a community center.
What time? When did Don Tisoni start the open mic?
So, from what I understand, they've always tried to be more of a community center, and so they got there in the late 70s from their old church burnt down mysteriously in a fire, because we don't know who started the fire. That's not a funny joke. I'm sorry. Couldn't resist.
Yep. Billy Joel, I got it.
Yeah, I know, but Anyway, so they had to buy a new building, and they bought this building. And I believe the open mic started in like 1979, but it was being run by somebody else. And so there's been a couple of hosts, but Don took it over. He claims just like 12 or 13 years ago, because he was co-hosting and all those other hosts one by one left and, you know, retired. I like to pretend, though, that he's an eternal soul who's walked the earth since time began. And he's always hosted open mics all over the world. And this is just the most current one.
He's like Kane in Kung Fu, just going from adventure to adventure, open mic to open mic.
Yeah, he loves to travel too. Whenever he can, he'll go to an open mic in Massachusetts or Connecticut or Rhode Island, because he really, just like us, he really believes in that spirit of people of all different skill levels coming together to be a part of an event.
I can say I've been there many times. I've performed there many times. And what I like about that place is because he features so many eclectic artists, so many talented people. And what he does is he gives one person a 45-minute set. They're the featured headliner, and you'll put a bucket out or a jar out, and people can put money in there. So they have a chance to earn some money. They have a chance to get people to hear their either comedy, poetry, music. But then the other 15, 20 people, how many people ever show up, sign up, and they get a chance to play 2-3 songs or do, like for me, when I was doing comedy, I would do 10, 15 minutes until I did my 45-minute set with you, were my MC. That was a fun night. So I like the fact that he highlights local musicians, just local talent in general, not just musicians, poets, comics, anybody that has something to say or do. Everybody is welcome. I love that about Don, and I love that about your spiritual hour.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I've even seen a few magicians come in and do card tricks where the card lights on fire.
Yeah.
And think they're going to burn the building down. And that the only thing we've not had, which I hope someone who hears this will, maybe they have a scarf dance, you know, because that would be welcome too. If an interpretive dancer came to teach belly dancing, that would be fantastic.
Well, you know what, though? One of the things I really do respect about you is your fearlessness. You will get up on stage and do or say anything. And it's not just you saying jokes, it's you just playing different characters. And I want to talk about that later. But I think that's what I like about you the most, is because you get up there, you just don't really care if they like you, if they hate you. You're just having a great time, and you're saying what you feel or saying what you think is funny, and 99.9% of the time the audience is with you, and I love that.
Yeah, it blows my mind, Rich. I was just having a conversation with my dad this evening. I was like, half the time the stream of consciousness, I'll just have a thought. Like it used to be that on an index card hidden in my pocket or a napkin, there'd be at the very least a beginning, middle, and end. But usually, because it's a 15-minute set or a 45-minute set, I might have 10 or 12 topics and even 3 or 4 poems. But in the true spirit of improv, I would always be willing to do them completely out of order, completely ignore the index card, maybe only touch on, like I said, the beginning, middle, and end, but move them around. And so what has evolved ever since I started doing this and, abandoning true comedy. In 2009, I was trained to, have that, the 5-minute set that's memorized, and then you grow it to a 10 and then a 15-minute set. And I used to do that, 100% or 95% memorized. But I just had so much fun with that stream of consciousness. But I've been blown away and amazed that people, they'll ride the wave and enjoy it. So I'm thankful that it has to be striking a chord somehow. I don't know how, but it does.
Well, you mentioned one of your heroes is Robin Williams, and he was like that. He would get up on stage, maybe have 20 minutes or 25 minutes of prepared material, but then he would just go off for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And a lot of it would just be looking at the room, and they'll start dancing around like Pavarotti. And it's hilarious because And that's what I think what makes it so exciting, because you never know what's going to happen. Every time that I saw you, every time I saw Rob Williams, you never know what's going to be different, what he's going to do. So every time I've seen you, I've never seen you do the same set, which is very amazing. And I've seen you perform many times.
Yeah, and I do have that as a safety net, though, and I think that is what helps, is that you never know what I'm going to say or when I'm going to say it, but I'll have in the back of my head at least, 15, 20 minutes of material that is in there. And what's funny is I don't even know, so I'll, of course, before a big show, especially if it's, say someone's paying me to come out and host a show and do a 45-minute set, like I said, I'll try to have 12 topics from previous shows that I feel I can fall back on, but they never come out the same way. Yeah. So one day I said something that even blew me away. I couldn't believe that I was saying it.
Well, for me, I took improv. I was in an improv group one time, and what I learned, that actually helped me with comedy, because with that, you just free your mind. You don't think in improv, and you just say the first thing that comes out of your mind. It may sound stupid, but working in improv, you work with a group for the most part, and they would feed off of that, and then that would turn to a completely other skip. But I learned to be more off the cuff with improv, and just not going up there, because if you think about all right, I have to remember this, I don't want to screw up, I think it just becomes too rigid and it becomes too rehearsed and it doesn't sound natural. So with you, I could tell that you could see the wheels spinning while you're up on stage, all right, what do I want to do next? What am I going to do? Aha. And I like the fact you always go for not maybe shock value, but just to get a reaction out of people.
Yeah, and I was at the Community College of Rhode Island for a while, taking an acting class and then taking acting 2. And so I got to meet some people that I have practiced improv with, and learned that you do the practice just to see how you're going to freely jump from idea to idea, but then you do have to accept that anything goes, and see, don't be rigid. And so that's why I love improv so much, because it frees you to just ride the cosmic wave, as I say in my spiritual hour, from time to time. So you're just you're taking a journey with the audience.
I love it. And you know what I like about you is because so many people are always afraid to fail. And I have a very similar mentality to you, where, you know what, who cares? If it doesn't work this time, I'll make it work next time. If maybe they won't laugh today, they're going to laugh tomorrow. Just go with it. Have fun. As long as you're having fun, which it looks like you're always having fun. And maybe one part doesn't work, but then you start going on something else, and that expands into a completely different set. So that's what I most like about your sense of humor and your type of performing.
Yeah, and so of course, growing up, I knew about Robin Williams and Jim Carrey. So I've always loved that idea of, because I'm not necessarily in real life always in the mood to be extravagant. Yeah. But I love that in a performer, whether they're just a character actor or a comedian. So when I was a kid, I'd create all these characters, and some of them would be very shy, very quiet. And but eventually someone reminded me about Andy Kaufman, when I think I had heard of him vaguely in high school, but then in 2007 someone's like, what you do is almost anti-comedy like Andy Kaufman. So I started watching some of his old interviews and some of his performances, where he considered himself a show and dance man, because he loved to impersonate Elvis, and I loved Mighty Mouse. So the fact that he would just do that to see on Saturday Night Live. But what I loved about him and still love about him has become something that I really do, which is become almost like a scientist. So yeah, I do not to shock people, but I'm observing both people before the show, if I get to talk to anyone, during the show, as I see their reactions after the show. And to me, it's a playful way to learn about humans, even though I am a human, you know, but so like because he was a very playful guy, and he was never afraid to be the villain. He was never afraid to really trick, like, you know, nowadays everyone's triggered, right? But he wasn't afraid to do that. And so I try to emulate some of that spirit with what I do with my really angry or like psycho rageaholic character that I often will play on stage.
Well, I was a huge fan of Andy Kaufman. I remember when I was young, Taxi was really big. He played Foreign Guy, which became Latka. Foreign Guy was a character that he performed, and then they signed him for, and he hated being on that sitcom. He hates it, like you said, he just wanted to be a performance artist. And what I love about him is he never, ever let up on the joke. He never let you know when he was kidding. And I like the fact that he hated when people yell, "Oh, do Latka," and he would just get so angry. He would sit there and read a book, and people would start laughing. So he'd read the first couple pages, and he would end up reading the whole book until everybody walked out. He just didn't care. And you mentioned the villain. I want to get into this because he had so many different characters. I love his wrestling character, and that's when it was great because he was getting so many people angry, and he was loving it because he was in a joke, and it was Jim Lawler, which there was a big thing on on David Letterman, where they had a big fight and he slapped him and he was, that's it. And then the next day they had to fight and he was paralyzed. It was so real. His parents rushed into the hospital and said, Andy, we're going to sue this guy. He goes, "Mom, I'm kidding." So I just love the fact that he would take it to the extreme, and he loved messing with people. So yeah, I am a huge Andy Kaufman fan. I loved, obviously Latka. I love the wrestling, but my favorite character has got to be Tony Clifton, the lounge singer that is horrible and just hates everybody and just puts everybody down.
Yeah, I found my brother basically bought this beautiful jacket that reminded me of Tony Clifton. And he had only worn it once for a dance when he was in college, right? And so they gave it to me. So for the longest time, I would travel the country, not doing a Tony Clifton impersonation, but just wearing it and just feeling connected to that energy, that spirit of being like, you know what? I'm wearing this jacket. It reminds me of Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton. I don't give a fuck. Oh, you're going to cry because I said something that hurt your feelings? Oh, no. And it was so empowering to, bring him into my minds. I try to center myself before every show. And so to think of people like him who had that fearlessness, who could do all those characters and not give, sorry, I'm trying not to swear, not give a kahooey.
Go ahead and swear. YouTube's uncensored, so don't worry about that.
Well, I was trying to make sure it would be appropriate for the radio show too.
Yeah.
So if I accidentally swear, I apologize. But
no, go ahead.
I was just going to end with, sadly, my luggage was stolen by a Greyhound employee in 2017, and that jacket was lost. That was one. So if you ever come across a jacket that makes you feel like Tony Clifton, cherish it, because I just love that character that he played as well. So,
well, you know what the best part about that character is his best friend / writer, Bob Zamuda. He used to play a person in the audience that would just completely mess with him. He'd heckle him. He'd be like, "Do the Uchi Bunker, do the Edith Bunker," and so he would mess with him, and it got so Andy Kaufman on stage got so angry that somebody pulled a gun out at him. And he goes, no, I'm just messing with him. But it was great with Tony Clifton because people started to realize that Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton were the same person. And then so he got angry with that. And what he did was he'd have Bob Zamuda play Tony Clifton. So if you see a lot of these skits on the Dinah Shore show, the David Letterman show, a lot of times it's Bob Zamuda. And even Letterman said in an interview one time, he goes, I thought it was Kaufman. I didn't realize it was Bob Zamuda until about 10 years later. So he just, even when people thought they were onto him, he was one step ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be something that we'll have to eventually collaborate, where we, you know, because they had a mask, right? So that Bob could fool people, like even on TV, like you said. But if we could come up with a character that we both could play, that would be hilarious. I would love to do that one day.
Count me in. You and I have a very similar sense of humor, I think. So I think we could make that work. I think it'd be great. Speaking of your sense of humor, there's a lot of times I hear you talk about your life growing up, and sometimes it gets a little dark. Is there any truth to that? And is that where you get a lot of your humor from?
So I am one of 8 kids. My parents, like I said, raised us Christian in a Christian school. I being one of the, so my sister is older than me, and then it's me, and there's 4 boys, 4 girls. One of my siblings, Tiffany, passed away in a car accident in 2007. And so yes, my childhood being in such a strict, you know, you'll burn in hell. Yeah, who gets told at 5 years old, say this prayer or you'll burn in hell for all of eternity? And I'm not making fun of any religion. Whatever helps you be a good person, I'm a fan of. But it turned me into a dark humor type of person because I finally started to question it. Like I said, when I got into the public school, I was able to question it, right? And study Buddhism and Taoism. But then my dark humor came forward because people like Mitch would say, swear, man, if you want to be a comedian, and you're not going to burn in hell if you say, you know, oh, you said one bad word, like, you know. So it was very liberating. That's why I love dark comedy, because it's forbidden from the younger version of me when I was a kid, too terrified to do it.
Have your parents ever?
Question.
No, what I was going to say, have your parents ever seen your set?
Oh yes. So it wasn't that dark. So when I first started doing comedy, after my sister died, I had been out in California trying to take some acting classes, maybe get into an improv troupe out there. I come home and I did Frank O'Donnell's comedy boot camp in 2009. And my parents came to the graduating class, because I don't know if your viewers know about Frank O'Donnell, but he used to do a 9-week program where he would try to help you write your 5 minutes. And so my parents came to that, but it was very PG. Okay. And then they'd come when it slowly became PG-13, and then it became R or even X-rated. But when my parents were there, out of respect, because I still respect people of a, you know, any type of religious conservative background, I try to know my audience. I'm not afraid to offend my audience, but I can tailor the show to be respectful for the people who are paying to get me there, you know?
Yeah.
So here I am doing a show for like my aunt, my grandmother, my parents, maybe 1 or 2 of my siblings. I thought I was doing a good job, Rich. I thought I had taken an X-rated show down to like somewhere between PG and PG-13. And I guess I said the B word accidentally. And my mom was just so upset, you know? She was just like, we raised you better, you know?
If they've only seen Athan Phynix the darker years.
Oh, she can't. I can't invite them, to be honest. I love doing family-friendly shows, and that's when I'll invite them. But then, because my newest character, Athan the Absurdist, screams because he loves, like, I love Louis Black, I love Sam Kinison, and of course love Andy Kaufman. So I started screaming and becoming more of a performance artist. And my mom hates it, Rich. So even if I do a family-friendly set, but I fall to my knees and start, like, you know, wailing out, yeah, she still gets upset. She goes, you know, you don't need to swear to be funny. You don't need to scream. She's told me at least 100 times. I'll end with that. Every time she hears me, I just can't win with this woman. You know, you're scaring people. And keep in mind, no one has ever come up to me after a show and said that I scared them.
That's funny.
It's right. She doesn't like it. She's not a fan, Rich.
What are they a fan of? Who'd they grow up listening to?
You know, my parents raised us on wholesome things. So it's kind of funny too, because I was raised on Full House, Family Matters, you know, Home Improvement.
Yeah.
So, but they don't watch, like they would never watch Bob Saget's stuff, you know, the raunchy stuff Bob Saget did.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even watch, you know, some of Tim Allen's raunchier stuff. They just always, they're just PG people, you know.
That's funny.
PG-13, they'll watch PG-13 or R, but it's kind of, and I respect my parents, as we all should, but it is kind of funny to watch how they, like, you can tell they're uncomfortable. You can tell they're flinching a little bit, you know, a sex scene. That was uncalled for. Why did they do that? You know?
Yeah, that's funny. You know what I'm happy about? My parents were pretty open-minded, and they introduced me to so many different things. Growing up, I used to listen to the old George Carlin albums, and even he's cleaner, and not in his personal life, but his old albums, Bill Cosby. My father used to have those albums, which back in the day, he was kind of funny. But for me, my all-time favorite comedian has to be George Carlin. And then my parents introduced me to Robin Williams as I got a little bit older. So luckily my parents didn't really hold anything back from us, my brothers and I, and they let us. So I think in a way that I was jaded by the time I was 12 years old. So nothing really affected me. I was never offended by anything. Nothing really bothered me. And I think that that's a good way. Instead of parents who try to repress their kids from everything bad, as soon as they break out of that bubble, they're going to go crazy. I do my best to, I do agree with you. Because I've always wanted kids. I don't have any kids. So if there's any women out there who want to date me, give me a call, send me an email. But no, I do agree. I would rather raise my kids letting them listen to Robin Williams, obviously they'd have to be at least 12 for the dirtier stuff. Because George Carlin I love how dark he got near the end with his last, say, 5-6 specials. But I would definitely raise my kids to be more open-minded and let them, once they were old enough, let them listen to that stuff. Yeah, because I don't like that. I feel it did do a lot of psychological, and my parents didn't mean for it to do that, you know. Yeah. So that's why I'm respectful of my parents and of people who are raised the same way I was, because, you know, that was just the way it is for a lot of people. They feel that, you know, you got to protect your kids from these harmful things that will turn you into a pervert, you know. A raunchy pervert, Rich. Unfortunately, it has the opposite effect. They think they have your best interest at heart, but in the long run, I said, you turned out well. But so many kids I know, as soon as they hit 19, 20, they moved out of the house for the first time and they've realized what the real world was like. Now, forget it. I have this argument with people all the time. I think parents just want to be their kids' friends, and they just, oh no, don't worry about it. It's just the opposite, where they're so laid back with them. It's like, no, teach them a little respect, teach them a little, and oh no, I don't want to hurt your feelings. It's a timeout period. No, it isn't. You're grounded. Just, I think that the parents are in the opposite now, where instead of being too strict, they're not strict enough, and the kids are just walking all over the parents. So it's sort of taken a weird turn in the 21st century.
Yeah, it definitely has. And, you know, that's why I'm so blessed to have known my friend Mitch, because by him I could have ended up, addicted to drugs or, you know, really crazy, as you say. And what helped me become so balanced, even though obviously I'm not perfect, I've got my weird quirks, as do most good artists, you know. Yeah. I think of Gene Wilder, you know what I mean? Yeah, we all have our quirks and our demons. But being forced into see a psychologist at 12 years old, being forced to learn to meditate, learning the importance of not the two extremes. So you don't want to raise your kids like they're Puritans from 500 years ago, but you also don't want to, you know, raise your kids like it's the 1960s or the Gilmore Girls. there's something to be said about finding the best of both worlds and finding that nice middle line, that nice balance between the two, instead of like, so yeah, it's something to be said about finding some common ground between different parenting styles.
Well, there's a perfect meme I saw, and it was so true. They showed one half of the screen was the old days. The principal is telling the parents what the kid did, and the parents are yelling at the kid. Now the principal is telling the parents what the kid did, and all three of them are yelling at the principal. Like, don't you talk to my son like that? It's like, no, my kid is privileged. My kid, you know. And now that we talked about this, it's like, oh, nobody can be offended. Everybody is a winner. Oh my God, I wouldn't want to hurt your feelings. It's just I think it's just making kids weak. And George Carlin brought this up. You know what I love about George Carlin? Things that he said back in the 90s are more relevant today than they were. I mean, he was talking about, he came out with a special in the late 80s or early 90s talking about airport security. 2001 happened. Bam, it was all the same thing. He was talking about anthrax in the water, talking about churches. And a lot of things he said back then came true. It's just he was so far ahead of his time.
Yeah, that's why even to this day, I love watching the specials in their entirety, watch clips on YouTube. I believe most of his specials are still available on Amazon Prime Video. It's funny how sometimes you have to go to different streaming sites to find some of these comics. Sometimes some of the specials are owned by HBO, and some of them are owned by Comedy Central. And but it's great whenever you can find some George Carlin, and it's true. And that's why he's so timeless, because he was able to hit on things that are about human psychology and human behavior. And I love that when he said that, by the way. Like, don't treat your kids like winners, because not every sperm deserves a name, I think was one of his lines.
No, my favorite line of that one, the title of that skit is called Kids. And the last line is like, kids are just like adults. There's a couple winners and a whole lot of losers. And that's how he ends it.
Yeah.
But it's so true. He talks about like how they have to wear a helmet for everything. They can't even enjoy a day of fun. In kindergarten, they're already worried about their college application. He goes, let kids just have fun. Haven't you ever stared out a window and just said, I don't care about anything? The kids need to be kids. It's so true. And it talks about like how becoming weaker and weaker and weaker because the parents just have no control over the kids anymore, and they're so worried about their feelings. Oh, my feelings. Don't want to hurt my kids' feelings. So I like that. You know what? And somebody brought up a great point. They said if you just took his skits, went up on stage and read them seriously, it's a great quote on America, or just great quote in society. But he made it funny. He made it interesting with all his facial features and like his moves and the way he said it, his inflections. So he took something very serious but made it hilarious and made so many great points. And he said his greatest show was Live from New York or something like that. I can't remember. I think it was Live from New York. And he said because that was the first one where he figured, I don't really have to make people laugh every 3 seconds. He goes, I can make a good point and I'll get the clap and I'll get people to understand what I'm trying to say. But he goes, that's when I realized I'm going to take this in a completely different direction. And that was my favorite time too, was when he took it into that direction. I love the Hippity Dippity Weatherman. I love all the old stuff, but Class Clown from the 70s. But my favorite of all time has to be You Are All Disease, where he just goes off on kids. He goes off on germs, goes off on religion, which is my all-time favorite one, because he just talks about, as I'm sure I can see from your facial expression, he knows you know exactly what I'm talking about. When he goes, he's saying, he was talking about bullshit. I'm just gonna swear, I don't care. He's talking about bullshit. He goes, biggest bullshit there is religion. There's an invisible man in the sky, and he looks and watches everything you do. And if he gives you a set of 10 rules, and if you don't follow them, you're gonna burn in hell and rot and die. But he loves you. And he just goes on from there. That to me was probably like my favorite of all of his specials, because everything he said was spot on. And it was funny because I sat front row for that concert. I saw that concert live, and when he was doing it, you could tell like he'd say one thing, some people would go back like this, he'd say something else, other people would get a little shyer. I just standing ovation. I was the only one. I could care less. I loved everything he had to say.
Yeah, that is. I'm happy for you. I'm not jealous. I'm happy that you got to see him live. So that's one thing, because I was being raised so old school, I didn't get to see comedians live in high school, and I would have loved that, to have seen Robin Williams or George Carlin live while they were here. And but thank goodness it was recorded, because I love rewatching all those. Because you're right, his timing is just so spot on, and he was so playful with it. And we can always, I'm totally fine if they edit the swear words out, so it can be, we'll do the dirty version on YouTube, but if they can edit it, do the clean version for your radio show, that's fine with me. But yeah, it's because he wasn't afraid to offend. Again, it comes back to that same theme. George Carlin, Andy Kaufman, Robin Williams, they weren't afraid to offend. They weren't worried about your feelings. They didn't care if you were triggered, and I don't either. Go ahead, cancel me, I dare you to.
Well, that's what's so sad, because comedy is supposed to, that's where you're supposed to say things that are, you cross the line, but you're doing it in a funny way, and you make something that is serious, but make it absurd and make it funny. But people just, now it's so sad. People are in there with their phones. They record that one line they said. It's all over the Twitter, and, oh, we can no longer watch this person. Oh my God, this person's canceled. It's just sad how so many people, and you know what it is? Another comedian that I like, Bill Maher, he brought up a great point. He goes, I think the reason that kids are so offended by everything is because they're bored. They have such an easy life now. Everything is given to them. Now they need something to be angry about. They need something to rebel against. Back in the 60s, you had civil rights. In the 70s, you had all these other issues. Same, and now in the 90s, 2000s, kids, for the most part, have a really good, easy life. No challenges, and they need something to rebel against, need something to fight against. And I think that that's a lot of it, what it is. Most of the people that are so-called offended, I think it's faux offense. Oh my God, I can't believe you said that. And they don't even know what the story is. They're just like keyboard warriors trying to get a reaction out of people.
Yeah. No, I'm trying, I hold the bowl in my hand just because it helps keep me from fidgeting. I was always a fidgeter in school, and they'd always be like, stop fidgeting, because I'd be playing with my pen or pencil. Yeah. And then I'd be doodling, because I love to draw. I've always loved to draw. And they'd be like, don't doodle, respect us. So yeah, I agree with you, because when we were, I'm a little younger, even though I hate for people to know my age, I always love to lie to people. And so even if I live to be 100, I'll hopefully keep saying that I'm 27. It's such a fun age, because I wanted to die at 27 like a lot of the greats, and I didn't get to die at 27. So now if I just keep saying I'm 27, maybe when I finally do die, they'll be like, Athan Phynix, dead at 27. But yeah, I agree with you. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was hard. And the teachers were always yelling at you, always telling you that you were doing something wrong. You didn't have time to, and they didn't care. If you told the principal that the teacher hurt your feelings, the principal was like, so what? We pay them to teach you, not to make you feel good. No one cared. I felt good about my self-esteem. Well, except the psychologist. She was the only one. But even then, I told her, I said, but do you really care? Like, I want to believe that you care, but let's be honest, you're being paid to care. Like,
exactly.
So yeah, these kids, they definitely have it too easy. We didn't have smartphones, and
I'm glad we didn't. I'm so glad that I grew up in the time that I did, at least, because I mean, I spent most of my time outside doing so many different things. I wasn't inside in my room alone on my phone, texting people all day, playing video games. It's just, I mean, I know they don't see anything wrong with that because that's all they grew up with and that's what they're used to. But for me, I think they're missing out on so many things.
Yeah. And I don't remember if it was Dave Chappelle or Bill Burr, but one of them in an interview at one of the shows actually had to pay money. They made it, they were smart enough to talk to the venue, and people had to put, it might've been David Cross, because I follow so many comedians, as I'm sure you do too. But one of them was smart enough at one of their shows to say, if you want to attend this show, it said on the ticket that you would have to surrender your phone, either leave it in your car or surrender it at the door, because no one's allowed to bring their phone into the show, because, you know, Bill Burr especially, we weren't soft. They would beat it out of us if we were soft. So there's like the idea that you're going to come and try to ruin the show for everyone by filming it and then not even waiting. So disrespectful, these kids. Not even waiting till you got home. Like, because back in the day, if you hated a comedian, you had to run home and you had to write about it or call your friends. But no, they're filming it during the show, trying to get you canceled during the show. So I respect those comedians who are like, no, I'm not putting up with that shit. You can't bring your phone into my show, because if you're going to go home and get so hurt, you're going to at least wait till you get home, you know?
Well, to me, those are two of my, I think, the most current favorite comedians of mine, Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr, because they know what they're doing. They're hilarious. They make so many great points, and they're unapologetic. They don't apologize for every little thing they say. They're like, who cares? Get over it. One time somebody said, Bill, aren't you worried that, you know, people are going to cancel you? I don't read any of that stuff. I can care less. And that's why not too long ago, he's on Saturday Night Live, and he started talking about all the Karens and all the people that are so easily offended. And of course, he did that intentionally, and that got him even more popular with people that didn't know who he was. And same thing with Chappelle. He was just in trouble for something recently and on Netflix, and he said, no. He goes, I don't really care. He goes, what I said, I agree with, and I'm not going to apologize.
Right. And, you know, those guys are great. I love watching their specials and going back and watching some of their earlier work, and especially being interviewed, you know, on Letterman or on Conan O'Brien. And yeah, they always say that. They're like, you know, it's comedy. You know, even David Cross, who was, I loved Arrested Development, so I still follow David Cross. He's like, it's comedy. Whatever happened to, you know, the fact that you're making a joke, you're trying to poke fun at something that's true, or maybe it's partially true, but, you know, you're playfully poking fun at how weird human beings are, how strange human beings are. And like, grow up. That's what I love about Bill Burr. He's like, grow up. Like, it's a joke and I don't care. And so that's really what I try to emulate in my spiritual work too. Like, I don't hold anyone's hand at the spiritual hour from 1 to 2. I try to keep it real. You know, you came and you hosted one of my event. You spoke at one of my events. You know, I try to be playful. I might tell a joke. I might laugh at something that someone's, you know, if there's some spoken word, a poem, a blessing. But I try to remind these kids not to be, you know, question it, because that's what meditation and introspection does. It asks you to do the deeper work. Well, why do you feel that way? You know? Like, why do you feel so hurt? And why do you think we should care? Like, why do you think we should have to validate and make you feel like you know?
There, back when this started, I want to say in the late 90s, early 2000s, that's when I started to really see different things. There was I think it was a 2020 Dateline segment, and they were talking about how in some schools, they were taking out the red pen because they didn't want other kids to feel bad. Good. I want you to feel bad, because as they brought it up, they said, instead of trying to make the underachievers get to where the overachievers are, they're trying to make the overachievers dumb themselves down so the underachievers don't feel as bad. No, It shouldn't be that way. Don't model mediocrity. Go for above, go for extraordinary. Don't worry about like, oh well, everybody should be equal. No, not everybody's equal. If you want something, fight for it. So now instead of like making people want to be better, they're like, oh, I don't want to make them feel bad. So as we talked about before, everybody gets a trophy. Oh, there's no more red pens. It got so bad in the segment, they said they wanted to take out dodgeball in one of the schools because they didn't want the last kid that got hit to feel bad about himself. And then what's going to happen, as George Carlin said in another episode, he goes, what happens when you get out into the real world and your boss goes, hey, clean out your fucking desk, you're fired.
Yeah. And you know what else he said, which was great? He did say that, but the other thing he said, especially because I used to be a neurotic germaphobe, because back in the 80s, there was a guy. So this guy on PBS really fucked me up because he used to travel the world dressed in a skeleton suit. And then he'd also dress in a meat suit, and he'd teach kids a fear of germs. And so I was a germaphobe. I was almost a hypochondriac, you know, thinking I have every disease on the planet. That used to be a big part of my act, talking about how there's germs in the air and they're everywhere and they're going to kill you. But he said in one of his specials, when he was making fun of like, where did this fear of germs come from? And he's like, you know, one day you're going to be weak, you're going to die, and you're going to deserve it. Yeah. and it's that was something he recorded probably in the early 2000s. It
was 1999. That was You Are All Disease. I remember that. It starts off with fear of germs. Why, you pussies. He just goes off on a rant, and it's so true. He goes, everybody's got to wash their hands, everybody's got to spray this, everybody's got to overcook that. You can't even get a decent hamburger these days. It's so true. That's the same one where he talked about airport security. He talked about, finally he goes up, was it disgruntled worshippers, which look what just happened in Texas in the synagogue. It's everything he said years ago is coming true. And that's the same episode where he talked about anthrax in the water, which happened in 2001. So it's funny how relevant what he said back then is. I wish he was alive now, because I would love to hear what he have to say about what's going on now.
Oh yes, definitely. And but you know, that special You Are Diseased, the one right after it, I mean, he kept being on point. The one in 2004, 2005, the one in 2010, even, and I loved how, I don't think it was his final one, because I loved the last two that he did right before he passed away. Or actually, sorry, he hated that word. He was like, why can't people die anymore? They have to pass away. Like, you know, that's how soft. Yeah, it's like all of those specials from the 90s and the early 2000s are so spot on about how soft and weak people have become in 2022. And I usually say, and I used to experiment with veganism and vegetarianism, and I'm back to being an omnivore, right? But I'll meet all these soft people who come to my, you know, my past meditation programs at the community college and now my current one. And I'll be kind to them because I think it's important to be kind. But I'll say to them point blank after the service, like, toughen up, you know, because if you were on Naked and Afraid, you know, that reality show, if you were off in a go, it's about survival, baby. If that lion or that grizzly bear or that snake or a hippo, like, the jungle out there is tough, man, and you got to be tough too, because, you know, they don't care about your feelings.
Well, you know what? It's funny. I saw George Carlin live every single year from 84, 85 up until his second to the last special. The last special that you were talking about is called It's Bad For You. But the one that was after You Are All Diseases was originally called I Love It When a Lot of People Died. It came out in 2001. And what happened, unfortunately, HBO made him change it to Complaints and Grievances. But I saw the special before it was a special. And it was actually called I Love It When a Lot of People Die. If you watch it again, you'll see that he says that all the time. And unfortunately, it wasn't him. He did not want to change it. HBO made him change it because he had a contract with them. He would come out with a special every year and a half. But yeah, right up until the very end. And the last, he died in 2008. I was going to buy a ticket for that show. And I said, you know what? I have HBO. Tickets are so expensive these days. I'll see him next tour. He died. The last tour I could have seen him at, he died. Same thing with Rob Williams. I got a chance to see him live at the Oakdale, which is in Connecticut, on his last time he started touring, and he was hilarious as always. And I never got a chance to see him in his heyday, but I thought when he came back to comedy back in the 2000s, he was still hilarious, and he had a lot of new things to talk about.
Well, that's why it's so hard to remember when George Carlin died, because I watch, like even tonight, I'll probably go on the internet and rewatch You Are Diseased, or that one Jamming in New York, live from New York. Because we were so fortunate, even though it would be so great if he was alive today, or even if he had, been able to live 5 more years and give us 5 more specials. There's so many that were filmed. I think the George, doesn't the George in the Box have 14 specials? It's a decent body of work. And so I'm thankful for that we live in a time when people like George Carlin and Robin Williams graced the planet with their ability to not give a hooey about whether or not you or I would be offended, and just, make us think, not just make us laugh, but make us think about, how strange humans can be when they're trying so hard to live in a bubble.
Well, somebody asked him that. They said, aren't you worried about losing your audience? He goes, no. He goes, there's always going to be somebody there watching me. He goes, if the people that didn't like me in the past, they liked me before, but they don't like me now, get out of the way. There's a lot of new people that like my new stuff. So he always had that mentality. He said, I can really care less if I lose an audience. He goes, I'm going to say what I want to say, and there's always going to be somebody there to watch me. And I love that mentality, because even when I was doing comedy, because as you see my act before, I used to have people say, oh, you should make it more generic and you get, more of a wider audience, or you could play more places. Like, no, I'd rather have the small rabid audience that loves the stuff, instead of somebody going, hey, what'd you think of Rich? Which one was he? I can't remember what he said, but he seemed like he was okay. Either people love me or they hate me. I don't know how many times I got like, I'll never have you on my show again. You freaked me out with that hand. I got that so many times because I have cerebral palsy, and I would make jokes about that. And, you freaked my girlfriend out. I'm never going to have you on my show again. I'm like, I had a list of different people that turned me out. I loved it. The more people hated me, the more I loved it. I could care less, because there were a lot of people that liked me and there were some that hate. But I think when you're trying, we talked about a little bit, when you're trying to do something, you don't have to be memorable, but the more memorable people are the ones that are fearless, as we started this conversation with, where you just go out and do what you want to do and not worry about what other people might think, or not play to the audience, play for yourself, perform for yourself.
Yeah, and I do respect you for that, because I remember that night we met. It's so funny, because I was hitting up so many comedy clubs, well, not just comedy clubs. Like, I'll never remember where we met, because it was just either Massachusetts or Connecticut. I was just hitting up any place. Half the time I'm in a bowling alley or a church or a school, because like even like an Italian restaurant will be like, it's comedy night here at the Olive Garden. I'll never remember where the hell we met, because it was just such a generic, random place where they just happened to be doing a comedy night. And I was like, I'm game, me and my buddy of the time. And yeah, you were fearless, you weren't afraid. And so I've always respected that. You're not afraid to be the anti-comic or the villain, and who cares? This guy, I think his name is Mike Rowe. I think I found him through Jordan Peterson. And, but someone on Twitter was trying to cancel him. And she's like, you've lost a fan. And so this guy who does he does a show, The Dirtiest Jobs in the World, I think. And he's just a tough, no-nonsense guy. And I apologize if I said his name wrong, because I don't know if his last name is Rowe. But I just loved his response. I saved it to my phone just to have as a rebuttal, because he goes, Diane, I don't know what happened to you in your life where you think I give a damn whether or not because these people are so entitled. They think they're so important. They think that they can come onto your page and tell you, I'm leaving. Who are you? Why should I care? Leave. Go. Oh, you know, oh, you're never going to have me on your podcast or your radio show again. Oh no. Oh.
How will I ever continue with my life?
Like, it doesn't even matter if Will Smith or one of the most popular people on the planet was like, you know what, Rich, or you know what, Athan, that was hurtful. I'm offended. I'd still say the same thing. I'd be like, exactly. Tell me why I should care. Who you know?
I actually was more. Somebody mentioned this to me. They're like, Rich, I think you like it better when people hate you. I said, yeah, because at least I'm eliciting a reaction. I always said I would rather have people hate me or people love me. Apathetic, that would be the worst of anything, where people just like, he's okay. Like, I like, and I didn't do it intentionally. I just have that sense of humor. That's why you and I get along so well, because we have that similar type of sense of humor. And I get up on stage and I say what I think is funny. And if people don't like it, well, that's their problem, not mine. I get off stage, and I used to always tell people, like, I can't believe you would do that. And that's like, what's going to happen? I'm going to get off stage. I'm going to continue with my life. It's not like I'm going to get off stage and that's going to be it. I'm going to die. So people are just so worried about, like, somebody even said one time, well, who should I really write these jokes for? I said, write it for yourself. Yeah, but what about the audience? I said, don't worry about the audience. Worry about what you think is funny, and let the audience find you. Don't find the audience.
Right. Very, very true. You know, because like, I would organize shows for, again, I would try to get paid to do a show. So I would ask the person who hired me, you know, I might ask them what they were looking for in a show, but it was never to impress them. It never was to please them. It was just to be, okay, so actually, here's something funny. I would hope to make them feel good so they'd pay us, because I want to eat. And so I'd want them to be excited about the show. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I don't give a shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm still going to do my act the way I want to do it. I'm still doing it for me and for my enjoyment, and to see how the audience reacts and responds. And if someone had come up to me and gone, you know what, you're not getting paid tonight, I'd be like, I would be pleased. You know what I mean? I'd be angry, because I'd be like, no, you know, you really should pay me. I mean, we agreed. But I think it would be a badge of courage, a badge of pride to know, because I've never been thrown out. I guess that's what I'm really trying to say. I'm choking on my words. I've never been kicked out of a venue yet, but I'd be thrilled, you know, because it almost feel like I was doing George Carlin and Andy Kaufman proud, you know? So yeah,
goes back to Lenny Bruce when he was getting arrested for telling jokes, which is really scary. He was just making comments and he was getting arrested. And it's funny because I'm sure you heard this story. Actually, I'm going to tell you the whole story. There's a place called The Bitter End. Years ago when I was in radio, my friend used to be in a band, and so they had a bus trip. So I went there and I was moshing around and dancing. I got kicked out of that club, and they told the band, like, if you ever bring him back again, I'm never letting you play here. So I said, I love that story. But what made it even better was that club is where George Carlin was in the audience. Lenny Bruce was on stage. Lenny Bruce got arrested. He got into the police cruiser. George Carlin, they put him in the cruiser. They were right next to each other. It was the first time Lenny Bruce ever met George Carlin, and he started giving him advice on comedy and things like that. But it's funny. I got kicked out of the club where Lenny Bruce got arrested, and George Carlin did too. The Bitter End in Greenwich Village.
Is that still open? Because now I want to do a holy pilgrimage, because I haven't been there. I need to go there and like try to find the booth, or just like sit in every booth and be like, this is where George Carlin and Lenny Bruce got arrested. Because yeah, it's like, I've not studied Lenny Bruce as much as I have studied George Carlin, but what I do know about Lenny Bruce, I've listened to some of his audio recordings that are available on Spotify, and it's fantastic because, I mean, that's real courage. I mean, like I was just saying in that story, you know, to lose out on $300 or $500 or whatever, you know, the bar's supposed to pay you for the night. That's like nothing compared to being you know, to actually get arrested for being a, you know, now you're really,
you knew Every time he went on stage, he knew something was going to happen. He knew he would get in some kind of trouble, but I love the fact he had the courage to go up there and say what he felt. I listened to the old Lenny Bruce recordings, but I think somebody said this, and I agree with it. George Carlin is the first one to make those kind of statements what Lenny Bruce was saying funny. Lenny Bruce was good, but I think George Carlin's the first one to actually make it funny, make a great point with a funny twist.
Yeah. Yeah, but I like how Lenny was a musician, and because one of the critiques I got from Frank O'Donnell, or maybe one of Frank's buddies, because you meet a lot of comics when you in New England, you just end up meeting a lot of comics, and that's why I like when comics can help out other comics in a friendly way, not in a I'm jealous of you, so I'm going to give you bad advice. And one of the comics was like, try to be like Lenny Bruce, because he really had a rhythm. He really had a tonality. Like, don't get, like he was almost like a musician in that way. And George Carlin too. George Carlin took it to the next level. But I think it's a shame because Lenny got lost in his drug addiction and died too young. So I think if he had had more time, if he hadn't gotten so lost, because it was depressing what happened to him, and to have to, I'm sure that I think his daughter, doesn't he have a daughter who keeps up the Lenny Bruce Foundation? And I think they're making a, I don't know if it's going to be a one-man show or a documentary, but something's coming out soon if it's not out already, to keep his alive and to introduce him to a new, younger generation.
Well, I think that's a good idea because unfortunately, kids today, I cannot stand when they say, I don't know, I wasn't born then. So I wasn't born during the Revolutionary War. I still know what happened. I wasn't born during the time when we had the greats like W.C. Fields, the Marx Brothers, Abbott and Costello, the Three Stooges, but I still know all about them. It's just unfortunately, I think kids today just live in their own little bubble. And if it's not the Kardashians or my 300-pound wife, whatever's the new reality show, they have no idea what's going on. So I think that sometimes they need to be reminded of because I think, unfortunately, and you can, I want to get your opinion on this. I think that the world is just settling for mediocrity, meaning that back in the day, we had greatness. Now anybody can be on YouTube and be a star. And no, you're not a star. You're somebody with a microphone and all these reality shows. No, you're not a star. I mean, people like Jackie Gleason, the Groucho Marx, Lucille Ball, Rod Serling, The Twilight Zone. That's greatness. Kim Kardashian, no. It's just I think that we're settling for mediocrity, and there's no such thing as greatness anymore.
Yeah, I appreciate being here today on at the very least your YouTube channel. And again, anything that needs to be cut out for time or any swear words I accidentally said or you said that we can cut out to get onto. I just need to be famous, Rich. I just need to be on the radio. Everyone knows that the way to get big is to be on the radio. Sorry. No, I agree. It's really sad. And that was one of the things that informs my stream of consciousness performance art that I do. When I center myself, if I get on stage playing this rage-filled serial killer, sometimes he's just a psycho who's just talking about his messed up family or something that happened to him like an hour before. Whatever I do in that stream of consciousness, I always usually at some point mock what has happened in the world today, because I just think it's so pathetic that, because I don't try to be famous. If I'm performing in LA, it's just because I'm excited to be out in LA and whatever will happen will happen. But these kids, they just think I'm going to be famous for doing nothing. I'm just going to flash. I'm going to try to, my mom used to call it softcore porn because she thought like if you tried to show off your tits, that it was like a slippery slope to pornography. So she was like, be intelligent. Like, yes, you can be attractive. Yes, you can be proud that you're in good shape, but have something behind that, whether it be comedy, whether it be, you know, a book on philosophy, like have something of worth, have something of value. And I think that's what people of all ages have forgotten about that. They just think that it's about having 1 million followers on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, becoming a brand influencer. I think that's so sad when you sell your body just to sell soap on Instagram. Yeah. And you have no real, you haven't matured into having a skill, a trade, you know, because when push comes to shove, like, that's what I love about you. You've experienced so much of life. You know, your viewers know that you've had a rich, sorry, that's wrong.
Pun intended.
But you know what I mean? Like, you've been a singer, you've been a comedian, you've been a life coach, yep. You've written a book. So like, you've lived life and you've contributed to society, and you have learned skills, and you have something of value to share. So I think it is sad that everyone tries to be so safe, so mediocre, so Instagram or social media famous.
I love when people say, you sort of mentioned it when somebody said, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an influencer. No, that's not a thing. I mean, unfortunately, now it is a thing, but they don't even want to have any kind of career path. Basically, they just want to go on YouTube, as you said, and just, or Instagram. I want to tell you what you should like. No, do something of value, do something of importance. But yeah, nobody really, that's what I said. It goes back to, we're settling for a world of mediocrity, and it's just getting worse and worse. And it's sad because social media, the technology we have could be used for so many great things. I can see what's going on in the world. Say an example would be in Alaska right now. I can look up anything I want on Google, and kids are probably the dumbest they've ever been, just because they're lazy and they don't want to have to study. They did a study where it said kids don't really know, they don't memorize anything anymore. All they do is memorize where they can find it. So there's really nothing going in. There's like, I don't have to memorize that. I can just look it up. And it's just becoming, the dumbing down of society right before our very eyes.
Right. And that film, there was even a film that wasn't the greatest film, but I think it was called Idiocracy, and it had Luke Wilson, Maya Rudolph. And I rewatched it last year, and I was like, you know, this isn't the best film in the world, but it was accurate then, and it's still accurate now. We're witnessing the dumbing down of society. And, you know, that's where I still usually travel to my shows with some of my favorite books, pocket-sized books, normal-sized books that I'm rereading. You know, people nowadays, they won't read books. They're like, it's a waste of time. And I'm like, that's crazy, you know, that you don't have like an actual book, like at least one book that you would reread. Like the fact that you're looking to Twitter and Instagram and Facebook for memes, and then you just save them to your phone, and you don't even have it memorized. Like, no one wants to memorize anything anymore. And, you know, I used to have to commit things to memory, and I still do. Poems. When I was in the 7th grade, they had me memorize Opportunity, which is a poem, I think, by, his name is, wow, I can't remember his name, but even I'm getting dumb, rich and terrible. So this is mine.
As I said, right before my very eyes, dumbing down of society.
Rolling Stone, I don't know. It's a great poem, but you know what I mean? Like, that's why I try to challenge myself.
Yeah.
So to save this interview, I will say that I can admit that even I, Athan Phynix, need to every day challenge myself to write something, to read something, to memorize something, just to strengthen my brain, to make sure that I don't turn into a bowl of pudding.
You know, it's funny, as you mentioned, I do a lot of different things, but what I do is I prioritize my time. So what I'll do is, like, 45 minutes, I'm going to work on my podcast, get the interview ready. Another 45 minutes, I'm going to read. I always have a book on me. As soon as I'm done with one book, I'm already ordering another one. And I don't like Kindle. I don't like any of the tablets. I love an actual book. And with the other things, when I was doing comedy, I would take another 55 minutes and just go over my set over and over again, because if I had a show. So instead of all this time, and I can't stand when people say, Oh, I don't have time for that. All right, so what'd you do? Well, I got home, I ate, I watched TV for an hour, then went to, it's like all this time you watch TV, you could have been doing this, this, and this. So I think that people just use that as an excuse because they don't want to try anything new, or they don't want to, or just too lazy to even do it. But for me, you like, again, you and I have a very similar mentality where I need to be doing something. I need to be pushing myself. I need to try different things because there's one thing I cannot stand and I never want to say is like, life is boring. I never want to have to say that. And I can't remember the last time I've said that word boring. There's always something to do. I'm always having fun. I'm always trying something different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing that we have in common, which is why we have been able to be friends all these years. And but I want to say that that poem was actually by Henry David Zulinger. And
Okay.
the reason why I'll say that is to bring back the memory of Norm Macdonald. Yeah. Because before we run out of time, talk about another comedian who would tell an old joke from 100 years ago to not be funny, just to be like, hey, I'm about to say this 10-minute joke that I think is funny. No one else knows. I'm butchering it. I'm changing it as I go. You know, I'm messing it up, but I don't care. I think it's funny. And yeah, I think I always respect people like Norm and people like you and I who do that, you know, who are, because we're trying to make mistakes and learn from our mistakes, you know, grow from our mistakes. So I think that's important. That's one of the things that's been lost on this instant gratification. You know, it's about this internet fame and instant gratification of, I'm going to be famous for nothing. I've done nothing.
Back in the day, you'd go to get a job and you work your way up to CEO. Now kids go in there and say, no, I don't want to have to do that. I want to be the boss right now. They don't even want to work for getting to that point. They just want to go in there. I want the Mercedes. I want the job. I want the office now. I don't have time to do that. Somebody even said to me one time, they were looking for a job. I said, well, why don't you get a job at McDonald's? Oh, you hardly make any money there. I said, well, how much money are you making now? Nothing. I said, well, isn't that a little bit better? It's just kids, for the most part. There are exceptions. I'm generalizing, obviously, but for the most part, they just want to, as you said, go in there, instant gratification, instant success. And I think, unfortunately, what reinforces that are shows like The Voice, America's Got Talent, American Idol, where kids go on there and they become an overnight sensation. No. What about all these bands that became a 20-year overnight sensation and they learned a lot from that, from being on the road for years? They grew up, they experienced life, and then they could actually write good music because they lived life. You get these kids that are on one TV show, all of a sudden they're touring the world after one season of The Voice. No, I mean, sometimes I'm happy for them, but I think they're missing out on a lot of actually struggling and failing over and over again until they get to that point, because they're appreciated a lot more.
Yeah, and you know, that's a really good point, because a lot of these shows have done a disservice to a lot of people. I remember auditioning for I think it was America's Got Talent. Kind of I didn't expect to get on, but I just thought, well, it'll be a fun experience, and who knows, anything's possible. And I remember the judges liked what I did, and I was like, yeah, I'm an improv performer, so I'm similar. I used to be a comedian, but I'll do it similar but not the same, because they're like, you're gonna have to do it again. That's what, you know, a lot of these kids don't understand is, you know, I think that you know, millions of people audition, and most of those people don't get on. And then even when you do get on, you had to audition multiple times. And yeah, I didn't. The second group of judges was like, we'll call you back. And then I think I got an email that said, thank you for your time auditioning for America's Got Talent. But you know what? I kept performing and I kept learning from my mistakes. And I appreciate that they said that I was funnier. I don't know what they said as the critique. I think they were like, you were funnier both times, but what we're worried about is we need it to be exactly the same every time, because we're going to be filming it so many times. And we'll cut this in editing, because basically what I'm trying to say is, yeah, these kids don't, how many of them though do we remember? Carrie Underwood, Kelly Clarkson, those are the only two that come to Clay Aiken.
Yeah.
But Clay Aiken's a politician now.
Yeah, I know.
And so a lot of people thought that they were gonna get on TV and be famous. And because they didn't have that resiliency to be rejected and keep going, their careers, they might have toured for a year or two, but they're back at home living with their mom and dad because their 15 minutes of fame is over. And so,
I got to tell you a funny story about that, because I can't remember his name now, but there's a comedian out of Massachusetts I used to perform with. I've had him in some of my shows in the past. What happened was he was an open micer. He was like a big fish in a small pond in Connecticut, or he was one of the funnier comedians. He got accepted into America's Got Talent, and it went to his head. He went from open micer to Radio City Music Hall. He had a nervous breakdown, not literally, but pretty close. He just lost it. And we were all the established comedians who've been doing this for years. Like, yeah, he didn't struggle enough. He had no idea what to do, because he went from open mic at Joker's Wild or Olive Garden and just went to Radio City Music Hall. And you know what's even funnier about that? It's because I knew this kid at the time, and they were showing, they show the videos of their life story. I said, first of all, that's not even his house. That's his girlfriend's house. Second of all, that's not his car. He doesn't even have a car. They made up this whole story. So when I seen that, I said, this show is complete BS, which I know a lot of reality shows are anything but reality. But I saw it firsthand, where I knew his life story, and I said, none of this is true. And he was on there for a while. At the time, it was Howard Stern, Howie Mandel, and I can't remember the third judge. But they loved him the first couple of times. After a while, they rejected him, and it looked like, if I could find the clip, I'll show you. I thought he was going to start crying on TV, and he didn't know what to do. And I think he gave up comedy. He didn't know. He just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, and even because this is an interview, I will say Chris Esper's name, because.
Well, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't get. What I love about this show is it goes as short or as long as we want.
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to say, only because I was like, you know me, I'll talk for 2-3 hours, but then the editor has to do this tougher job to get to the golden nuggets. Yeah, I wanted to eventually talk about that, because our buddy Chris, who you know through me, is working on editing at least 1, if not 3 reality shows for cable television right now. And it's just so funny, because it's kind of like, see, I always understood that, because I was raised with movies. Like, I loved movies. Even as a young kid, I was watching, all these Hollywood movies. So I didn't fall for the live reality TV. So, but yeah, a lot of I don't know, my mind's mush now. I think
I know what you're saying, because I'll give you some examples. One of them is Antique Roadshow. I know I was in Nashville. I was at this antique museum, or the Civil War museum, and somebody was telling me the owner of a shop was on the show, and they said he told me he refused to be on the show, because what they wanted to do was give them all the antiques, have somebody walk in and say, oh, I would love to buy it. He goes, no, this is fake. I don't want any part of it. So that's just one example. I'm giving you another example. So yeah, reality TV show. If people think it's not scripted, why do you think when there was a writer's strike about 10 years ago, the people of the reality shows were mad because they weren't getting paid? It's like, because they're writing a lot of that dialogue. They're writing the situations to get them in there. You don't think that somebody just walks into a place and this happens. No, it's set up. So I know what you're saying, but I'm glad you brought up Chris Esper, because he is doing a documentary on you. So I wanted to talk about that, and how is that going? Because I recorded 2 scenes for a documentary. One where I was interviewing you at a radio station for my radio show. Another one where they just interviewed me, asking about you. So what is the documentary about, and when do you see it being released?
The only reason why I left the camera was I thought my laptop would show me what time it was, but I'm a terrible interviewer. So I hope that even after we're done, you'll consider having me on the show again 2 years from now.
Oh, definitely. I'm having a great time. I think this is a great conversation. So, you know what I like about this show? It's an interview show, but it's more of a conversation. 95% of what we talked about, I had no idea we were going to talk about. It just evolved from a couple of the questions I had. So don't worry about it. You're going to be on the show. I find it very entertaining. I'm loving this conversation. And yeah, you're welcome anytime on the show.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because I know that I wasn't sure if I needed to. I almost emailed you yesterday to say, oh, are there certain topics you want me to make sure to cover? You know, are you going to have a certain, amount of questions? And I was like, no, I'm an improv guy. So I'm just going to ride the wave, the cosmic wave. Whatever happens, happens. He'll figure it out. It's his show. If he needs to cut it down, then he'll cut it down. But I met Chris Esper at they were showing short films in Providence, Rhode Island. And I had gone, I had forgotten that it even existed, because maybe they had taken a hiatus. You know how sometimes an event will happen for a while and then the person can't do it anymore. So anyway, all of a sudden, Facebook reminded me that there was this networking event for New England filmmakers, and they were showing like an hour's worth of 10 short films, and it was free. You could just put a donation at the door or something, like whatever you wanted. So I go there not really expecting, to be offered a film, a starring role in a documentary. I didn't expect that, but that's what happened. I met this guy, Chris Esper, and I jumped into the conversation because they were talking about Andy Kaufman. And I was like, oh, I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm pretty sure I heard you guys talking about Andy Kaufman. I love Andy Kaufman. So I jump into the conversation, Chris Esper, myself, and some other guy, Jimmy, I think is his name. And anyway, I said, hey, I'm a character actor. I'll go all over the country. I don't always play, sometimes I'll play a character once and never again. Sometimes I'll play a character 10 times, 20 times. And he's like, so he says to me, it blew my mind, because this, you just have to talk to people and you just have to be yourself, because you never know what kind of opportunity the person is going to present you. So he just kind of blew my mind. He goes, I'm one of the filmmakers here. You sound like an interesting person. And I've always wanted to do a documentary that studies identity and personality, and what is identity and what is personality, but do it in an entertaining way. So would you be interested in being in a film, whether it's a short film or a full-length feature film? We'll figure it out as we go. But would you want to meet for coffee? Is that weird? And I was like, I'm glad you asked me to be the star of a film, because I think it would only be weird if I asked you to direct a film about me. I was like, thank you. We just met. We'd only been talking for, 10, 15 minutes, because we both got there early because it was a networking event before the films were being shown. And then after the films were over, you could drink beer and keep talking, actors and directors. And so I got to know him. This was April 2019. And we decided to do the film together as co-producers, because I thought that'd be hilarious. I'm already playing a character who's very pretentious, to make fun of all these kids and people today who think they're going to be famous for no reason other than they're good looking, right? So I play this very arrogant, pretentious character. So I was like, yeah, I should co-produce a film about me, because it fits with the character I play on stage anyway. And so now we're still working on that film, but we filmed he probably has close to 24 hours of footage. We filmed you, filmed Don Tisoni. We filmed a few of my other friends. The only none of my family will be in this film except my mother. She was the only one. They were all like, why would someone be making a film about you? And also, no, I will not.
How'd you get your mother to be a part of it?
What?
How'd you get your mother to be a part of it?
That's another one of life's surprises. Because basically my family likes to pretend that I don't exist, and that like to acknowledge that I've been acting in plays and musicals since the 6th grade, because I started in theater, and then I became a comedian in 2009, and then I became an improv performer / performance artist. They like to pretend like this is just something that's not happening or it's a hobby. Yeah. So when I ask them, they almost like roll their eyes because they're like, no one will ever see that film. I was like, well, maybe 3 people, maybe 300 people, who knows how many people, you know, but this is a guy who asked me to be in a film. And my mom finally was like, I guess she just wanted to be a good mom. She's like, you know, son, I know this is important to you. And I know we don't always see eye to eye in your career, but as long as you don't make me look bad, you know, I'll be in your film. I was like, because I told her, I said, don't worry. He's a really nice guy. He won't ask you any questions that will make you uncomfortable. We'll show you the film before we release it. If you feel that you've said something that you don't want to say, you know what I mean? And I meant it. I wouldn't lie to my own mother. I'm not a monster. Yeah. But yeah, I thought for sure she'd say no, like all my other family members. But for whatever reason, she was like, I want to support my son. I want people to know that I'm a good mom. So good for her, man.
Well, you know what's funny? What you said, what your other family members said, brings up what we talked about before. What's the one thing they said? Well, nobody's going to watch it. Well, don't do it because you think it's going to make you the most famous person in the world. Do it because it's a new experience. It's going to be fun. And it's interesting. And you don't have to do everything to get fame and fortune. Do something just for the adventure, the experience, and just because you want to. So it's funny that your father or some of your other family members were thinking along those lines, like, well, why should I do that? Nobody's going to watch it. And first of all, who knows? This could be you could be the next big sensation. Nobody knows. And if you never did it, you'll never find out. I would rather fail at something that I loved than never, ever try it at all and say, oh, I wish I actually tried it. So, I mean, I think failure, the only way you can really fail is if you never try anything.
Right. And, you know, that has been, so to you know, Chris is so, I think, a really humble, talented guy. Because he's not afraid to fail. He takes a lot of risks. He's done a lot of short films. He's worked with a lot of different directors. He does cinematography. He edits. He directs. He produces. He's willing to learn from his mistakes. He's willing to take the critiques. He's written a book. He's writing another book where he has been interviewing directors, like people he respects from the 70s and 80s. And he's so fearless. He says, why not? So he'll reach out to them. And if they say, oh, you got to contact my agent, he'll reach out to the agent, you know? Yeah. And I do the same thing. I talked to someone who directed and wrote a film called The Wizard of Speed and Time, Mike Jetlove. I actually called him on the phone and spoke to him for 30 minutes. And it was fantastic. And most people wouldn't, you know, most people aren't like us. They're so afraid. And I hate to say it because it's true about my family too. Because they're worried that people make fun of me because I've been bullied my whole life, right? For being weird, for being strange, or you know, you accidentally mess up a joke, right? You say the wrong word, or you say the word, but you know, you mess up the timing, and so you don't get the laugh. Well, you pick up, you know, who cares? You learn something, right? You grow as a performer. I'm so appreciative that Chris was willing to take a risk on me, get to know me. We're good friends now. We always said that the film should take at least a year, if not 2 or 3 years, because most documentaries are more interesting when they take place over, you know, a longer period of time. But I just went into it thinking, hey, I've never been the subject of a documentary, and it'll be fun. I'll learn something from it. Hell, even if only 3 people see it, even if, you know, it's still an experience. So I don't have those delusions of, oh, this will be my 15 minutes of fame. And then, everyone will think I'm a genius, you know? No, I'm having some fun with friends. I'm learning about filmmaking. We'll get into at least 2 film festivals, I'm sure. We'll do a premiere in Providence eventually. If you want us to come up to Connecticut and premiere it in Connecticut, we'll talk about that. But
we'll talk about that after.
Yeah, but you know, you and your family will be invited to the premiere, whether it's this summer or whether it's next year. We still have 2 scenes and an animated fantasy sequence. So yeah, this is what's keeping this film from being finished, even though I think it's only going to be like a 45-minute film, or at most 62 minutes. But it's kind of stuck because Chris Esper, he knows he wants these 3 scenes, and we haven't been able to find theaters where, I told you this already. This is the fun of filmmaking. When you have a plan and things don't go according to plan because of a worldwide pandemic, you know, things get delayed. And but it'll be great once we can finally show it to you. And we got some good footage of you both times we filmed with you.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. You mentioned you have in the documentary, you have a character, and we talked about Tony Clifton. We talked about Foreign Guy. Who is your favorite character of yours?
I just want to say that it's so funny to have to talk about who my favorite character is, because my parents have 8 children, and one of my sisters is obsessed with announcing every single time I'm in the room or one of her siblings is in the room. She has this desperate need for validation. So she'll be like, I'm mom's favorite. I hate to break it to you, but I'm dad's favorite. And my parents have always said, for as long as I can remember, when I would be like, oh, am I your favorite? We love all our children equally. And my mom has said that hundreds of times. I love all my kids. I love all my kids equally. So it's tough for me to pick a favorite character because they're like my children, and I love the different children for different reasons. But I will say that I do like No Name the Bunny and Absurdicus, Beardicus, because they're clown characters that I got to create alongside Patch Adams and some of his friends. And that was, even though he's famous, he doesn't make it about him. He is one of those down-to-earth real people. And you've met plenty of down-to-earth real, you know, famous people who are just still humble, you know, still down-to-earth. And he's the same way. He's still alive, even though he did lose a bit of his foot to, I don't know, he had some type of health condition and they had to amputate. He had both legs when I met him. But anyway, it's about bringing laughter and joy to people of all ages, people who are dying, people who are living in orphanages. And it was a real blessing to be with someone who could be arrogant, right? Oh, I was in a movie starring Robin Williams. I'm the Patch. Yeah. No, he reminded all of us, you know, we were just strangers who went to learn about clowning, that it was about giving someone a gift, you know, of laughter. You know, he's like, that person, like, especially because we went to the nursing home where, who knows, maybe that person was going to die that day or, you know, that week. He's like, you might be giving someone a gift that is like priceless, you know, basically, you know, you're giving them, you're bringing their day, and you don't know how, you'll probably never see these people again. And so I just love when I have the opportunity to do that, to, you know, go to a place like a nursing home or a hospital where it's really just about, you know, bringing joy into people's lives, bringing laughter into people's lives, listening to people. You know, a lot of times you're in a nursing home and you break character because all of a sudden, I had this happen to me. I'm in this clown character, No Name the Bunny, right? He's very high pitched. It's like, oh, who is this? And then the woman, 90-year-old woman goes, that's my husband, George. He's been dead 10 years. I almost started crying, dude. All of a sudden, I'm listening to a 90-year-old woman go, we were married 60 years. He was my high school sweetheart. You know what I mean? Like, I can't remember all the details. I just know that when a character that's meant to be silly can touch people in that way, I don't know. That to me is really, really will always stick with me, those opportunities, you know?
I know one of your characters, the first name is Ethan. Who is that?
All right, Rich. I one of these days I'll have you on my podcast once I finally have figured out how Zoom works, because I know I know you have so many priceless stories about, you've touched a lot of lives yourself, you know, as an entertainer and just performer. So I do look forward to hearing one of your stories one day. But yeah, Ethan. So I was raised religious, and when I was 12 years old, I had seen the soap opera, These Are the Days of Our Lives, or whatever it was, As the World Turns. And it seemed, my grandmother loved those soap operas, and it always seemed like there was an evil twin, and it was very obvious that it was the same actor, because they just part the hair to the left, or they'd walk in with sunglasses. And so at 12 years old, I created Ethan, my twin brother, as like this, you know, obviously it's me, but he's my twin. And then I got crazier. I thought of Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and decided to have another, you know, be triplets, have a neurotic Nathan, another brother. And I love it. But Ethan's very spiritual now. He tries to be #humble and #grateful. And he talks like very soft, because I noticed that certain teachers, for some reason, they think that by talking slowly and softly, it means they're enlightened. And so Ethan talks that way. And of course, I study a lot of these teachers who I do think add value to the world. I don't think they're particular pricks. But unfortunately, in our day and age, people think that I learned yoga once, so now I'm an enlightened Buddha. And it's like, no, just because you wear yoga pants, just because you're talking softly. So that's where it's, you know, another arrogant character who thinks he's humble, who thinks he's enlightened, but he's not. He's just fallen into that trap of thinking that, you know, you read one article that Oprah wrote and you think you're enlightened.
Well, you know what I love about that is you, as Andy Kaufman would, if he was still alive now, you go so far as to have his own Facebook page. You post as Ethan, or Ethan posts. I'm not even sure if you two are really the same people. But he's like, oh, my brother Ethan, and you'd be like, oh, my brother Ethan. So I love the fact that you go back and forth, and people that know you know what's going on, but there's other people who are like, what the hell is this? I love that. I would go back to Andy Kaufman. I love that whole sense of humor of just never letting people in on the joke and just never letting up.
Well, that's what I'm worried about with this interview, and also with the documentary, is that I shouldn't have broke character. I should have been like, oh yeah, Ethan's my brother. Oh yeah, Nathan's my brother. And they are. We'll cut out the part where I admitted that they're just characters. And because in the documentary, you know, you see me as Athan Phynix talking about what is life, what is death. We've done 20 versions of the opening film where at first I'm telling the audience, fuck, like I'm swearing at the audience, and we cut that out and we go with this esoteric thing. But then we jump to him, and he's in a yoga studio, and he's holding the crystal. He has a crystal singing bowl instead of my Athan. I use this in my stand-up usually, but if I'm Ethan, I have my.
I love it.
But yeah, I try to not differentiate. So Ethan is on Instagram. Ethan's on TikTok, on Facebook. Neurotic Nathan's on TikTok. He's not on Instagram yet, but he's on Facebook. And so I try to have that. I think people will figure it out, because like we do interview Nathan, Ethan, and Athan, but it's for fun, you know. It's in that spirit. Huey, Dewey, and Louie from DuckTales, and the spirit of Kaufman with Tony Clifton. I don't care if people see. I mean, I do try to stay. I mean, when I'm at a show, I'll stay in character. And if I break character, it's to go back and say, ha, I fooled you. you thought I was Ethan Westwood, but I'm just Athan Phynix making fun of Ethan Westwood.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
so,
which I've seen that before and I love it.
Yeah. So I do try to stay in character, but I'm also not, I'm okay with like letting people in on the joke, because I think it's funnier that way when people realize that I'm, you know, a little bit more, I can make fun of myself. And I'm, you know, you can think I'm crazy. One guy told me recently, you were up there screaming, and I thought maybe you were psychotic, and I didn't know if I was call 911. And I'm looking. I love it. Yeah, he told me this on the phone just 3 days ago. He's like, I'm looking around thinking that I'm going to have to call the loony bin to come pick you up. And then people are laughing. So I realized it must, and I started laughing too, because if they're laughing, then it must be a character. You must not be having a total psychotic breakdown, you know? So yeah, I love that people are a little bit scared at first, but if they're smart, then they realize this is performance art. This is a character, you know? And it's fun. I do it because it's fun, you know?
That's what everybody should do it for. I mentioned it before. I said, I don't know how many people said, actually, when I was doing comedy, somebody said, why you always smile? Why you always look like you're having fun? I said, I love this. Like, you love this. I said, why do you do it? And they thought that they get up on this stage and somebody would see them and offer them a 13 HBO deal or a Netflix deal or a Comedy Central. Like, no, don't do it for that reason. Do it because you're having fun. And it's not just a one-time conversation I've had. I've had, I don't know how many conversations with people that said, I can't stand this. I always get so stressed out, or I always get so depressed before I go on stage, and when I get off stage, it's even worse. I said, then don't do it. That's one of the reasons I stopped doing comedy. I just got bored with it. For me, I sort of evolved into the motivational talks, which I'm having a great time doing that. And I did it at the weekly spiritual hour and other places. But yeah, if I'm not going to do something just because I might get fame or what other people expect of me. I do it because I'm enjoying it. And that's why I've done so many different things, because I want to try different things. And, you know, what I'm in the mood for at the time. Well, right now I feel like writing a book. Tomorrow, maybe I'll go back to comedy. You know, it depends. And that's why I always keep my options open, just like you. Because you have so many different plates you're spinning, and you're great at all of them.
Yeah. And, you know, whenever I get stressed out about, because sometimes I'll be thinking too much into it. Like I'll say to Chris, I'll say, what if we shorten the film down to 38 minutes or 45 minutes, and people still think it's one of the most pretentious, like, you know what I mean? Like I'll fall into the wrong mindset for a split second sometimes, where I'll say, well, I mean, if people just think this is the most pretentious film ever made, or it's, you know, doesn't make any sense, it's confusing and it doesn't make any sense. And I'll be a little bit anxious, right? Or I'll think, oh no, what if I've invested 3 years of my life for a piece of garbage, right? But then as soon as I reject that stupid thought, that really whatever you want to call it, ego-based or just really stupid. I prefer to not even use the word ego, because people, again, in the new age, new thought community, people are so pretentious with that word. I'm transcending my ego. I'm going to kill my ego. And it's like, shut the you know.
Yeah.
But I think of the guy, I think it was the director, Ed Wood, right? He would put out these films, or even Tommy when he put out The Room.
Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah, I think that there's value to just trying something for fun. And even if it's rejected, like even if people are like, this is a flying piece of poo, or this is, so what? You know what I mean? Like, you hopefully had fun and you learned something from it, and maybe you never do it again. Maybe you move on to you know, something else. And so yeah, I always try to have that mindset that I'm there to have fun. I'm there to learn and grow as a person, because And that's probably why I don't, because sometimes people will say, oh, why don't you have more followers on YouTube or on Facebook or whatever? And I'm like, because then it feels like work, you know? Yeah. I don't want, like they keep, and of course, that's the world we live in right now. It's really sad. They're always trying to sell me on Facebook and Instagram these seminars. Have you seen this? Everyone nowadays is either a single mom or a husband and wife selling a effing seminar about how to get rich on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm just like, shut the F up. I don't want to, because then it's, you lose the joy of just having these spontaneous, fun interactions, trying to make art for the sake of making art, you know?
Exactly.
So
they're making it or doing something where they can become more noticed, become more famous, more rich. They're not even enjoying any of it. So yeah, I'd rather have something that doesn't do that well, but I had a great time. I learned from it. And then for me, I always found out there's always an audience for anything you do. And I mentioned that before. So I'd rather have a smaller rabid audience that really loves you, is following you all the time, going every place you are, instead of everybody going, yeah, he's okay. Because you can be generic and there's no way you can make everybody happy. The only way you can make everybody happy is just being as generic and being as bland as you can be. And that's too much effort for me. If you don't like, I always say, you know what? If you don't like me, get out of the way. If you do, follow me for the ride, because I'm having a great time.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you. My friend who unfortunately he died, he and I used to work together, and he used to tell me to go. Now Don Tisoni does it. Don will do these, you've seen it. He'll kind of like playfully mock me, be like, I didn't really want to give this guy a feature. Or if it's a normal show, I didn't really want to let this guy up here for 15 minutes, but it is an open mic, and you know, I have to be nice because otherwise he'll kill himself. So, well, here's a guy, you're gonna have to, I'm sorry, like, you know what I mean? And
I love like, wow.
Yeah, it is hilarious. And Don will, and I'll be like, wow, Don, with an introduction like that, why did I even bother to put on pants this morning? Like, F you, man. And I'll just start screaming. And then I'll go off on those 15-minute or 45-minute, you know, tirades. And but I'm with you. I don't care whether it's 3 people or 45 people or 500 people. I'm there to be on the same ride, have some fun, but I'd rather have less people that really get it than people who are going to be triggered and offended and think, are you embarrassed? Are you? Oh, how does that benefit me to be embarrassed just because, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Like, as you said earlier, like when the guy says, well, you know what, I'm never going to follow you anymore. Is that supposed to really bother me? Am I supposed to care? You mentioned Facebook followers and Twitter followers. You also have a podcast. What's the name of it, and where can people find it?
Well, I will say this. I have a decent amount of Facebook friends only because for when my sister died, I foolishly thought, oh, if I have a lot of friends on Facebook, that will add meaning to my life, right? So even though I playfully make fun of people for like building a brand on Facebook, I think if you do it the right way, where you're just having fun with it, you know what I mean? You're sharing your comedy or you're sharing your poetry. I'm fine with, you know, if people grow a following online, you know, as long as they're doing it for the joy of, you know, the creativity or whatever it is they're sharing, the spirituality. I follow a lot of different people that I find so entertaining or interesting, you know, I'm sure you do. So there is a benefit to it. There's a dark side, but I did want to say that at least once. There's a dark side to it, but there is benefit to it that we're able to do that.
Well, I can tell you, for me personally, it's helped me immensely in the fact, especially when I'm actually know everything I've done. For me, it's been great for promotion. With comedy, it's helped me immensely. That's how I started Facebook, and the reason I started Facebook. But then when I had my book signing at Barnes & Noble. It was the biggest local author book signing I ever had. I played the Palace Theater. It was the biggest show for the second act. It was called People Over 50 who are living their life now and what they're doing. It was the biggest second act they've had there. So I have to say, without Facebook, I would not have those people there, because that's how I reach out to people that I never really talk to on a regular basis. I sometimes run into them. So yeah, for me, and as you and I talked about this before, I don't take Facebook seriously. I just take these pictures and just make funny captions with them or something, where I never take myself seriously with that. I'm just like, let me have some fun with it. But mostly for me, it's all about promoting, and it's been great.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you had me on the show. So thank you again. And I will say this, because I've always thought, again, I'm really just entertaining myself with my career, even though I've done shows. I've done plenty of shows where I get paid to come with some comedians and some musicians, and I get paid the most because I was the one who went to the venue to, barter with them to say, hey, give me $600 or give me $500 and I'll put on a 4-hour show for you, right? Yeah. And then I got to hire the sound guy, and then I got to bring in at least one band. And, if someone will do a show for me for free, I don't say no to that. I'm like, okay, are you sure you don't want me to at least buy you a beer or give you $20? No. Okay, fine, do it for free. But then you give someone $20, you give someone else $100, you buy someone a beer, but then you pocket, So I've done shows like that were successful, where we have like anywhere between 50 to 200 people show up, and those were a lot of fun. And I'll do shows like that again. But I just have so much fun with the free stuff, because there's less, when you just go into an open mic for a 45-minute set that people can donate at the door, rather than having to pay an $8 or a $10 or a $20 ticket price. I just really enjoy that. So I say that because I do a lot of self-sabotaging things that I think are funny, like constantly change the name of this podcast because I think it's pretentious. So they need to just search for Athan Phynix. Okay. And then, because I do it through Anchor right now, because I used to be on Blog Talk Radio, and I moved the show to Anchor. And at one point it was called the Athan Phynix Absurd Podcast Show. And then I changed the name to the Absurd Athan Phynix Podcast Show. And then I was like, you know what I mean? So like every week, to really fuck with people, because I think that's funny, because the more I can self-sabotage my career, the better. Because then I can be like, what career? So really, if anything, people should follow me on, find me on Facebook first, find me on Instagram, because then I'll put the correct link on Facebook, and then they can, or even if you just Google Athan Phynix, hopefully Anchor or Apple, because Anchor basically will send it to the major people, the major players. So I make it hard to find me because I don't want you to find me.
Well, what makes it even harder for people to find you is how you spell your name. I'll let my viewers know it's Athan, and Phoenix is Phynix. So Athan Phynix. Follow him on Facebook. He's hilarious. I've listened to your podcast several times. I love it. I'm a fan of it. So I'm glad you're continuing with that. What's the topic of the podcast? Is it just you ranting similar to Bill Burr, or do you have guests on the show?
Well, the Blog Talk Radio was ranting, and I probably only in the history of the show had one guest. I think I had her on twice, and but most of the time it was just me ranting. And then when I started this new podcast on Anchor, it was me ranting, because I was like, well, it worked on Blog Talk Radio, might as well keep it going. But the goal this year is to have it be a combination of the two. So some episodes are me just doing a nice short rant, whether it be 5 minutes or 15 minutes, but I am going to have guests. I would like to have you on the show, Don Tisoni. I'd like to do what you're doing, which is it'll be available on YouTube if I can film it as well. as have it be in audio format. It's just me. I'm not as technical a person. So I'm learning, these new skills. And but it's fun because, again, it seems like if you don't have a podcast, you don't exist.
Well, for me, as I talk to you about this, and when I do my motivational talks, a lot of things I do is because I was doing something else, and I didn't realize that was going to open up a door to something completely different. And with this, I was a guest on a radio show promoting my book, and I became friends with the DJ that was who was interviewing me, and there was another author. He goes, "Oh, I'd love to be on the show." I said, "Hold on." So I talked to him. I said, "Would you? He'd like to be a guest. Do you want to interview him?" He said, "Why don't you interview him?" Okay. I interviewed him. He goes, "Well, you want to take over the show?" Because he was busy with something else. I said, "Yeah, I would love to take over the show." And from that, I was interviewing week after week after week. The last show before the pandemic hit, where they can have no longer any more guests, was a person named John Bristol, who now edits this show. He owns Elmwood Productions. He makes movies with puppets, and we were talking for a while. After the show was over, we were still talking. We realized we had a lot in common. He goes, "We should do a show together about movies," and we were going to do it at the radio station. But then a month later, the pandemic hit. So he goes, "I'll create a YouTube channel. We could do it there." And then I said, "Well, I would love to do, continue the Claw's Corner." He goes, "I'll just edit it for you. Just film it on Zoom." So that, just me being a guest on a show, opened up this whole thing with podcasts, radio shows, YouTube channels. I never even thought about it at first. I was in radio years ago in the 90s, trying to do it professionally, and just there was no money in it. And I moved on to other things. But now I'm having the time of my life because there's no pressure. I get to do whatever I want. I get to have whatever guests I want. And it makes it more fun, it makes it more interesting, because I get to have people I actually find interesting instead of just interviewing somebody that, like, "Oh yeah, let me interview this guy. I really have no interest in what he's saying." But yeah, so I'm having a great time with this. And I do agree with you. Like, podcasts / YouTube channels seem to be like everybody has one now, and they're popping up everywhere. But I'm not doing it for fame and fortune. I'm just doing it because I'm having a great time, and I meet so many interesting people like yourself.
Yeah, and the next time you can come down to, so because I have these cameras that I'm still learning how to use, like I made the mistake. I used to have a Canon, and our friend Chris Esper told me, just get another Canon where you don't have to take the lens on and off. And I was like, no, I want to learn. I don't want to. I've done that. Ever since I was 12, I had one of those simple, cameras that you can just point and click. And so I buy these 4K cameras, just like his 4K cameras, that you have to attach the lens on. And I don't know how to use them yet. But I do want to get you into a room, get Don Tisoni into a room, like at the Mediator, right? Yeah. Turn on at least one, if not the 2 cameras, so that we get both angles. I got one of those. I just need to find a tech guy, really, so that I don't screw it up. Because if you come down from Connecticut, I want to be assured that so I'll test it out a couple of times, get the kinks out with some local guests. But I'll have you down sometime this spring or summer, and make sure that we can get the footage correctly for YouTube and get the audio footage, because it's a lot easier when you just record it yourself. Because when you're just recording it yourself into your phone on Anchor, they get everything perfectly. But as soon as you bring a guest into the mix, so I applaud you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, it took me a little while to get used to Zoom. So it's when we were joking earlier because you were trying to figure out how to get on here so we could do the interview. But I remember my first time trying to get it to work. Now it's just, I've been doing it for 2 years, so it's fairly easy. But with you, before the podcast and everything, you had a goal where you wanted to perform in all 50 states. How far along are you?
I feel that I'm at 27 states.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. I don't want to say 32 because I don't think that's accurate. So I'm pretty sure it's at 20, because the middle of the country is what eludes me. I've done all 13 original colonies. I've done some of the middle of the country. I've done, the West Coast. but it's the, so I still have to go back to, the places that not everyone goes to: Alabama, Kansas, Mississippi, Texas, but I will get there, because I said before I'm 50, I want to hit all 50 states, and I'm only 38. I'll be 39 this summer. Hey, if there was a way that you and I could hit up some of those states, if we could just go for a week or a week and a half, I'll do it.
I would love that. That'd be great. That sounds like a plan. Let's get the tour going. I like this. So how do you book it? Do you just go down to the state and look for either open mics or somebody that's a comedy club, bar?
I usually, back before COVID, it was a lot easier because you could stay in hostels. So you could get a hotel when you were sick and tired of meeting strangers. But if you wanted to save money, you could find a really well-rated, 5-star out of 5 or 10-star out of 10. You could find a really decent hostel for like $55, $60 a night, sometimes even $40 a night. And, you'd be in New York City, right? And then usually I do the research. I find the good, the hostel or the hotel. But then I always try to make sure there's a comedy club or a bar that accepts spoken word and comedians. Like, I'll call ahead. So, we're living in the internet age. So if someone tells me, check out Austin, Texas, I start looking up the hotels. I start looking up the bars. I think that's a website, openmic.com, and it just lists. And so that's what I used to use all the time. But I learned from my mistake of going to a club, a restaurant where Brent and I went, and it had only been 8 months, and the place went out of business. So, and we were so ready to do either the open mic comedy night, or maybe it was karaoke, because Brent loved to sing and I love to sing. So I was like, you know what? Always call ahead, especially when you're going out of state. Call up. It says you do make sure. So yeah, I always make sure I know at least one venue, because obviously if you're flying or driving to out of state, you want to make sure that you're not just showing up.
I have a funny story about a hostel. I used to perform at a hostel on a regular basis in New York City, and it was great because I think they called it the Comedy Dungeon, and there were so many different types of people there from all over the world. 50% of them couldn't even speak English. So all I would do is, because as I mentioned, my act is I have cerebral palsy, I would just stick my hand in people's faces and they would start laughing. That was like the common thing where, like, all right, you can't understand a word I'm saying because you can't speak English. So let's go like this. And like, ha, ha, ha. And I loved it. I had so much fun. I was there. It used to be every Sunday or one Sunday a month. I did it probably every month for several years. And I'm not sure if it's still going on. But I enjoyed. I'm not sure if it's still going on, but I enjoyed it. It wasn't the nicest hostel in the world. And I'll give you an example. One time I saw a roach about the size of my foot walk by me, but it was fun. I have so many great experiences of performing there. And you must have, you played in at least 27 states. You must have some interesting stories to tell me.
Well, I will tell you this. I don't remember the guy's name. I have his business card somewhere in my luggage or in my, when I go to a state, sometimes if I eat at a restaurant, I'll keep at least the business card, if not the, the takeout menu that's, for travelers, so that you can, you know how it is. A restaurant will have delivery. And so they have a takeout menu you can take home. So I was at a hostel for 8 or 9 days, but I started on the, closer to the top of Central Park. So it wasn't the nicest one. And then I maybe did 4 nights there and then went down to one closer to downtown. I was like walking distance from Times Square. So I was closer, to downtown New York City, and it was more expensive, but they were still doing a comedy night on Sunday nights because I was there full 8, 9 days. And the guy there, I name dropped you. And I can't remember the guy's name, but I'm pretty sure I have his business card, because I said, I've met so many comedians from Rhode Island and Connecticut. And I think he goes, like who? And I go, Rich Sear. And he goes, oh, I met Rich Sear. And I think the guy said, we weren't at the Comedy Dungeon, but he said he used to perform there, or he used to host it. So it's just funny, the small world.
Randy Epley. Randy Epley is his name.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one. That's funny. I was gonna ask you if you ever performed there, but yeah, that's the guy. It was the Comedy Dungeon, and I'm not sure it was closer to Central Park. I know that it's been years since I performed it. Probably 2015 or 2016 was the last time I did it, but I enjoyed it. It was so much fun. But yeah, Randy's a good guy. The one that you worked with. So last time you saw him, he was hosting another one.
Well, so I might have stayed. My memory is not always the greatest. I'll be honest, Rich. But like I said, I was staying at one that was right walking distance from Central Park, near the top of Central Park. But I didn't see the comedy show there. I think he said that the dungeon got so bad they weren't allowed to perform comedy there anymore. So now he's doing the second hostel, which was much nicer because it was walking distance from Times Square, right in the heart of Times Square. That's where they were doing it now, at least if I remember correctly. Oh, at least, again, it was 2018. But I was just there to observe, and he told me it was, and this is why I took his business card. I just never contacted him. He goes, "Oh, you're a comedian?" And I go, "Yeah, sort of." He's like, "Oh, well, the next time you're in town, or if you're going to stay in town longer, you could do the show." And I was like, "Well, I've already been here 8-9 days. I'm thinking ahead, because it was right before Christmas. So I'm like, I'm thinking ahead and home, but let me take your business card." See, self-sabotaging. This guy was ready to put me on the stage next week. I could have come back next week, or I could have stayed in town the next week. And I was like, "No, man, this city's too expensive for my blood. I'm going home to Rhode Island." Good guy.
Do you find the audiences differ from state to state, depending on, like, maybe you said you did, what states did you do more of? You said the middle part of the country you really haven't done yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've traveled to those parts of the country to check them out, because sometimes I'll go and I'll just do research. I'm more of a tourist. Like, I'll show up and I'll be walking around. I'll be, visiting the bars. I'll sit in the audience. See, because I'm like an undercover performer, because I want to learn what the comedians are like, what the people are like. So sometimes I'll just go to town because I've never been there. Like, I was in Asheville, North Carolina, and I had only paid for 4 days, and I knew there was an open mic. I went to see the comedians, and I almost went home without even performing. And then I said, "Oh, you know what? That's silly." So then I stayed an extra week, and I did end up performing, or maybe I performed that night. But you know what I mean? Like, I'll just do, but the people are both the same and different, I find. So, like, I do think the things that people might find funny in Savannah, Georgia, or Asheville, North Carolina, it's not the same type of things that would go over well in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was asking you that, because you have some of the more conservative states, some of the more liberal states, and the senses of humor definitely differ. And the which I think is funny was, I think the conservatives are less offended than the liberals. When the liberals get offended, and they're more with the, like, "Oh my God," more the cancel culture than the conservatives are. But that's why for me, I'm definitely somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't get offended by everything. I hate the cancel culture, but I definitely lean more to the left.
Yeah, I had it's so funny, because I was raised by Christians who were like, back in the 80s, you weren't supposed to talk about politics. They used to tell me as a kid, children should be seen, but not heard. So don't speak. And also, don't speak about sex. Don't speak about religion or politics. Try to avoid, because you're going to lose your temper. You're going to get into a fight. You're going to get punched in the face. And so my parents were always like, "We don't talk about politics in this family. We're independents, and who we voted for is none of your business."
I actually like that.
Yeah, I loved it, because even though I would try to get them to reveal, where they were leaning, they're like, "We're not talking about that." I was like, "Come on, you're a conservative. Come on, you're raising me in a private Christian school. you admit and they wouldn't admit that they were conservatives. Because, you know, they would say, oh, sometimes we vote Democrat, sometimes we vote conservative, sometimes we vote for the independent. We try to pick the person who's most principled, who we feel will do a good job when the world's on fire. And that's not always, just because someone has a red tie or a blue tie doesn't mean that they're the best person for the job, because maybe they're gonna, like you were mentioning with your friend earlier, they freak out with a little bit of criticism, you know, cracked under pressure. So my parents taught me the importance of like doing your research. Does this person have integrity? Does this person, but no, it was so funny because being raised in the theater world since the 6th grade, even though I was an independent, I started hanging out with a lot of Democrats, right?
Yeah.
And so to think that that those circles were tougher. And then all of a sudden in 2016, I realized, wait a second, I'm having more, like I'll hang out with anyone, but I definitely had fun at the comedy clubs and at the open mics in Savannah, Georgia, Asheville, North Carolina, South Carolina, hit up a few different spots. And yeah, I was having so much fun in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida. I even lived in Florida for 9 months because I was like, why is it that these, you know, conservative spots and these moderate spots have a better sense of humor? Because I didn't realize until, I guess it really was 2016 when I realized how delicate some of these other people are. And I'm like, why though? What is going on with the world? Why are people so soft?
I don't know, and it makes me so angry because I think it's the extreme radical on the left and the extreme radical on the right. The people that are in the middle. But the sad thing is that now it's gotten to the point where you don't agree with me, I hope you die. You can't even have a discussion with somebody about anything anymore, especially politics. After 2016, it definitely changed for the worse. I mean, the worst case of giving an example of this was that the Biden Build Back Better, the 5 or 6 Republicans that voted for it were receiving death threats. Probably the most boring thing in politics to talk about. They're getting death threats because they don't agree with the cult. And that's how bad it's gotten. That's why I don't even really care. Because like you, I always tell people, I said, I disagree with you on so many things about what your beliefs are in politics, but we have so many other things that we agree on. We can talk about music, talk about movies, talk about comedy, talk about books. Why do we have to get that involved? Because that's why I sort of agree with what your parents did, because it's really just, it never used to be this bad until 2016, where now if you don't agree with them, they just want nothing to do with you and they live their own little bubble and they're happy living life, just thinking that they're right and everybody else is wrong.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I've been studying history ever since I was 8 years old, because I had in the Christian school, I had really great history teachers. And they used to say things like, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And that really stayed with me my whole life. And then even in the public schools, I was blessed with really good social studies teachers. You know, they weren't history teachers anymore. All of a sudden they were social studies teachers, but they were like, you got to study history. So I've always studied American presidential history, you know, and even far back, you know, I try to study the ancient Greeks and the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas, right? It's funny, again, how soft these people are on all sides. I meet independents who are pathetic. I meet Republicans and Democrats who are pathetic. They just want you to die. They want to cancel you. They want you to starve to death. And it's like, and I'll say to them, listen, you a second ago called yourself a Christian or called yourself a Buddhist or a humanist. And we're talking about forgiveness, compassion, and kindness. But as soon as I mention Biden or Trump or Hillary Clinton, you lose your effing mind. And it's ridiculous. It's unnecessary. It's like these people, see, I'm lucky because I was raised with that idea of sin, right? Original sin, we're all sinners. And then when I started studying humanism and Buddhism, I changed it to just, no one's perfect, right? We're all flawed. We all, as human beings, because we live in a society, we try to learn, we try to grow, we try to, do the best we can do. And so I think a lot of people have forgotten that you are allowed to make mistakes. As long as you're not out there murdering people, raping people, you're allowed to say mean things on Twitter. You're allowed to say something that seems ignorant or sexist or racist as a joke. And then if you have to apologize because you went too far, you apologize. But even it's just gotten to be so, people are so pathetic about what they think they're entitled to. I don't think I don't think you're allowed to destroy. Listen, I don't care what Joe Biden or Donald Trump does. You don't need to kill yourself just because Donald Trump is still alive. That's pathetic. Okay? I'm sorry. That makes you a soft, pathetic. You're like a loser now. Grow up. He's just one person.
And for the most part, our lives are never going to change. It doesn't matter who's in office. I mean, my life has not changed since Bill Clinton was in office, George W. Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. I mean, my life has been pretty much the same. I've gotten pretty much the same amount of pay. My taxes are usually the same. So I'm so sick of all these people like, oh my God, the end of the world is happening if this person gets elected. No, not really. Right. There's a lot more drama when some people are involved, and you know who I'm talking about. But if you ignore it and just go on with your regular life and just ignore all the bullshit, who cares? I'm with you. And there's all the people that maybe all the people that I was friends with before all this drama started. All of a sudden now they don't want to talk to me because I don't agree with them. And then, you know what? I don't need you as a friend. And I'll just continue living my life the way it's always been, having fun.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, because you and I study history and understand the human condition, because we know about psychology, and it's all. Someone used to say to me, I forget. It doesn't really matter who said it because a lot of people have said it. Everyone knows that prostitution is supposed to be the world's oldest profession, but there's two professions. It's not just prostitution. The end is near guy, the end is near woman, the naysayer, that's just as old. Because as soon as people were able to consciously understand that they were going to die and that the shit could hit the fan, there was someone out there, drama queen, being like, the end is coming, we're all gonna die, So there's nothing new under the sun. It's all the same. And so I don't care whether, because it's always so funny. The person with the red tie thinks that the blue tie guy is going to bring they're Hitler, and they're bringing the end of they're so predictable. And that's what makes me laugh, is they're on your side as long as you're making fun of the other guy. But as soon as you make their guy, now you're a monster.
Well, you said it perfectly. I mean, this has always been going on. The only difference is you see a lot more of it because people are on social media. And now, say somebody who would never say something in public or would be too embarrassed to really tell everybody, this is what I really think. Now they feel empowered because they go on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and they see there's 1,000 other people that think just like them. Like, yeah, that's the way it is. And then they become empowered and they feel like they have a right to say it and nobody else has a right to their opinion. That's what's making it worse, is because social media, which we didn't have in the past, perfect example would be, let's use the Nixon period. People had the same thoughts back then. Oh my God, this is the end of the world. He's got to resign. We got to impeach him. This is the worst president ever. But back then they didn't go on Facebook and talk about it and get everybody all riled up.
Right. I think that a friend of mine was saying how the 24/7 news cycle has really helped, even before social media. Just the idea of having a 24/7 news cycle has really been bad for society because it's made people more fearful. It's made people more angry. It's made people more depressed and suicidal. You know, more. If you look at the suicide rate, you know, the amount of people who are becoming drug addicts and dying of accidental drug overdoses, the people who are killing themselves, it's gone up. And I think there is a real connection. That's the dark side of the 24/7 news cycle and the dark side of social media, is that not every thought you have should be on Twitter, you know, on social media, on any, and yet it is. And then CNN and MSNBC and all of these, even Fox News, they're all guilty of it. Oh, yeah. I don't give a shit what Kanye West ate for breakfast today. I don't, and this is how you know that society is so dumb. Every single day, Facebook and Instagram thinks that I care who is over the age of 50 and in a bikini. Oh, she's 55 and she's rocking a bikini. What? I don't care who's rocking a bikini. How is that important? I'm trying to eat my breakfast.
But you know what? There's a documentary on that. It's called The Social Dilemma. And I forgot which executive was the main protagonist in this documentary, but he was saying, he goes, it wasn't meant to be like this, but what it's creating is, you say you like something on YouTube, you like something on Facebook, the algorithm's like, oh, let's send him 80 more stories that are just like this. So everybody's living in their own reality bubble where they think that they're the only ones that are right. And the other person next to you is watching something completely different, the same thing, but they're getting a different view on it. And like, you're completely out of your mind. You're nuts. And unfortunately, they said we did it more for advertising purposes, but it sort of bloomed into this whole, this is the way you should think. This is exactly what's going on. I want everybody to live in their own little bubble. And it's like, it needs to be stopped. The problem is, you could stop it yourself. Everybody thinks that Mark Zuckerberg's the devil. He put out a product. If you're stupid enough to believe everything you read on Facebook, it's not his fault. It's your fault for being that dumb.
Yeah. And there's a longer one. I have not yet watched all of The Social Dilemma, which I'm going to do that because I've heard really, you know, pros and cons to the film. But it's definitely, I've always said to myself and everyone who would listen, you know, question everything and do your own research and make your own opinion. So, you know, don't believe a film is evil or a person is evil just because the mainstream media told you to, or some art critic told you the film was garbage. Actually go and sit down for 2 hours and form your own, you know, opinion about what you like. Because there's always going to be things you'd liked and disliked about any film, whether it's a documentary or you know, drama or a comedy. Yeah, exactly. But you use your brain to figure it out for yourself. And because there's this, what was the guy, Norm? There's a longer documentary that I should send you the link for. I think it's 4 hours long, but it was put out in the 90s. Noam Chomsky or something.
Noam Chomsky.
Yeah.
Noam Chomsky. I know him. I've seen, I don't know if I saw that one, but I did see plenty of his talks. I read some of his books. I like him.
They did a 3 hour or 4 hour documentary, I think, in either early 2000 or like the late 90s. Yeah. I just found it last year. It's so long, I haven't watched the whole thing, but he basically points out, you know, even the mainstream media is a reality show at this point because it's a 24/7 news cycle. So, you know, just because Joe Biden says something or just because Donald Trump says something doesn't mean that's what they actually said. But because people are so lazy and they see a meme on Instagram or Facebook or they see a tweet, but they don't do the research anymore, you know, because they just put too much faith in Fox News or CNN. And they're all guilty of it now. They're manipulating people for money because they're going to sell you products or they're going to get you enraged and sell you some, you know, during the commercial. Hell, even on YouTube now, they don't even have commercials. Even the podcasters go, hey, what? Are you worried that you're not going to have a job? Buy this or buy. It's like, yeah, what fucking world are we living in now?
No, it's gotten really bad. It just, but the difference is you and I and a lot of other people can think for themselves. And everybody has their own preferences, and even when I'm watching the news channel that I like, yeah, there's a lot of bullshit in that. But then I'll watch the other one. That's why sometimes I do this intentionally. I'll watch the same story on 3 different stations, and I just want to see the different takes on it. It's hilarious, the differences in the same story. I miss the days of Walter Cronkite, where he would just report the news. You had 3 networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and the next day everybody had the same story of what happened in the world because you saw the same 3 stations. Now, when you're watching the news, it's not the news, as you mentioned, it's their opinion. And so that's not exactly what happened. That's this guy's opinion, what he said happened. And it's just gotten worse and worse. But you have to be able to differentiate reality from the reality show.
Right. And that's what I loved about being on the road in 2016, because I remember going to 10 states and Toronto. And I, of course, like you, would watch a few different stations just to see, okay, what's Fox News, what's MSNBC, what's CBS, ABC, yeah. CNN. I would zip to different stations, but eventually, see what I've always trusted, because I've been trying to predict who would be governor, who would be president, who would be mayor. You go to the people, because word of mouth, and that's why I love traveling, as doing these comedy or these music comedy shows, because I dabble in a lot of different types of performance art and music and whatnot, magic even. But I would talk to the people, you know what I mean? Because for 1 week I'd be in North Carolina, and then I'd be in South Carolina. I'd look and see what people had on their, the lawn signs. And it's like almost like reading tea leaves, you know what I mean? And I don't know, it's just so funny, because again, when people go into that booth, they could have 99% thought they were going to vote for one person. And then all of a sudden, that moment of truth, and you don't have to tell anyone, at least not yet, you can vote for whoever and yep. So that's why I've always liked traveling on the road and trying to just talk to the people, because they'll tell you things that you won't hear on the news, or that you won't even hear on social media. If you talk, you've talked to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why I think it's funny, because when you see these news reports, everybody's outraged over this. No, it's probably 3 guys on Twitter, but the whole world has to change and everybody has to be canceled because 3 people who would never even go to your show, who would never even bother buying your album, your CD, or streaming your show, are complaining. So now we have to change everything because that one person's complaining. But the way the media makes it sound, because it's all about ratings now. As you mentioned, the 24-hour news cycle, now it's like, how are we going to fill 24 hours? We have to make it interesting. We have to keep people watching. And they just fill it with the most sensational headlines to get people's attention, even with the clickbait, they call it. When they'll have a headline, you click on it, and the story has nothing to do with the headline. They just need those clicks to get more people to read. So they sensationalize everything to get viewers, to get readers. And I don't know, it's just unfortunate. Most people are like sheep in a way where they just keep going, follow it, believe everything they read is everything that it's on the internet. It's got to be true. It's on YouTube. It can't be lying. Most of the time, it's not true.
Right. And you've been, I've been studying, even though I wasn't alive during the Nixon administration. Of course, I go back and read about it. And trust me, I'd love to live for 1,000 years. But I think I call it the pendulum theory, because things just kind of swing back and forth. History repeats itself in similar ways, but with different, the faces are different, players are the same. So in the end, not much has changed. It's unfortunate because violence happens and bad things happen all the time. But the world is still here, man. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's 1904 or 2022. Somehow this human species, George Carlin, We're like a parasite. The earth just can't shake us off, like a bad case of the fleas, you know?
Yep.
So like, well. You know, we've survived World War I, World War II, who knows, World War III. I'm sure, you know, I'm sure we'll still be here. I guess I'm just a romantic in that way. Like I have that romanticism, no matter how cynical I might play the character, like we're all gonna die and the human species will be gone by the year 2042. So don't worry, you know. I think humans will be around for a while because, you know.
Like a bad virus, we adapt.
Right. We keep adapting. We're like a cockroach or a bad virus. We just adapt, and it's always unfortunate, you know. But even that was so silly. Like I will weep with anyone if your mom dies of cancer, it's sad. If your mom dies of COVID, it's sad. You know, death is always sad. But the human spirit just keeps going. You know what I mean? You find ways, you get up every morning, you know, you have to enjoy every day. You cry because you're sad about something, you cry, but you can't get stuck in it. So, you know, but anyway, this was a lot of fun, man. I'm glad you had me on the show.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a couple more questions for you if you have a little bit more time.
Okay, sure. We'll wrap up and then I'll get myself a little bit of what time is it even? I don't have hold on.
11:51.
What? It's already 11.
Yeah.
No wonder. I think I'm hungry. I'm like, I've only been talking to him for like an hour, 2 hours tops.
Yeah, almost 3 hours. No, what I wanted to talk about, you mentioned magic. One of the last couple posts I've seen of you, you said you're still looking for a woman that you can saw in half. Did you find that woman yet?
No.
Again,
so what I'm excited about is I found a woman on Facebook and I saw her in half, right? Yeah. But she only wanted a selfie. It really pissed me off. We were supposed to film 5 days later, and all of a sudden, my anxiety has gotten really bad, and now I very convenient because we rehearsed. I wanted to rehearse the show like I did with the first girl, my friend Stephanie, who I've known since I was 10 years old, went to the same high school, lived in the same neighborhood. And I had sawn her in half in 2019 for my feature that I did that Chris Esper filmed because we had just started filming in June and we filmed that feature in July.
I was there.
Then, yeah, it was great because I rehearsed with her. I said, come 2 hours before. It's real easy. We'll practice. You'll go home. You'll do your makeup. You'll come back. I'll buy you and Chris pizza. So I wanted to do the same thing because all of a sudden she went back to school for nursing and or for something in the medical field, MRI. She was going to help people read their MRIs, I think it was. Anyway, so I find a girl on Facebook ads that said, oh, I was levitated in high school. I'd love to be your sawn in half. And she bailed on me. So then I said, not again. I won't advertise on Facebook. I'll try to, I just asked close friends. So I asked this girl, Maddie McGill, in the end of, when was the election? 2020. So I asked her in October of 2020, and we filmed it in February of 2021 because, people were still a little bit scared of COVID. And then I did it live with her in February and again in May. But then my friend Stephanie came back. So I took all those pictures. She took 500 pictures. She just kept snapping on her phone. We only filmed it once in June of last year. But then I found this girl through my friend Chris Esper, Kate Eppers, and I had the bravery to just be like, hey, you're always wearing fantasy characters, doing all that cosplay. Would you want to be sawn in half? I know this is weird to ask. And she's like, oh, I'd love to be sawn in half. So I'm up to 4 girls. And Stephanie is back in my life, but she's so like me and like you. She's got a million things she's doing. Yeah. So no, I've been successful because it's such a weird thing to put on Facebook. Hey, do you want to be sawn in half? I'm a real magician. It's a real box from Las Vegas. and people will just go, they'll like it or they'll love it. Like I have 33 likes, Rich, but not one person contacted me.
They probably want to see it. They don't want to be a part of it. That's the problem. Like, yeah, I'd like to see somebody sawn in half. I don't want to be sawn in half.
But 4 people have lived to tell the tale. Obviously, I know what I'm doing.
The other 7 we won't talk about.
Right, yes. Please, if you would like to be sawn in half, contact me. But I'm from the 80s, so be willing to wear a sexy outfit. Don't be like, that's sexist. Hey, I'll wear a sexy outfit too. Las Vegas, baby, where everyone is flamboyant and everyone's throwing glitter in the air. You know, they probably where I should locate to. Probably feel right at home.
You're all about equal opportunity. I like that.
I am. Hey, a few guys I asked, I said, hey, do you want to be sawn in half? And they were willing to do it. But the box is actually made male or female. You have to be, I guess, less than 165 pounds. Okay. So a lot of guys, unfortunately, I didn't get to saw them in half yet because they were like, oh, I'm 250 or I'm 220. You know how guys can hide their weight a lot better than women can.
Yeah. That's it. Well, before we go, I saw this on Facebook and I loved it. What is your legacy? You've done so much. You mentioned podcasts, comedy, magic, spoken word, spiritual hour. I mean, there's so many things you've done. You've created characters. You've traveled 27 states. You're going to do all 50 in the near future. What defines you and your legacy?
Wow. What a question, Rich. You know, I wasn't expecting such a beautiful question. I should have, because I've seen your other interviews. Man, you're like the Barbara Walters. Watch out.
Haven't made anybody cry yet, but.
And you're not going to make me cry because my heart is as cold as stone. Although you can warm up.
I tried. I tried.
That's a good question, and I don't know how to answer it because I'm like you. I've done so many things, and I never know. Like I love puppets, so I have puppets that were given to me. I was making puppets as a kid, right? Because I love Jim Henson's Muppets, and people would give me puppets as gifts, right? So I still have like Jim Henson knockoff puppets, and that's why I'm really excited about the work you're doing with Elmwood Productions. Yeah. And that movie, I want to go to see that.
February 18th. It's called Bernice 2, T-O-O. It's going to be at the Warner Theater in Torrington, Connecticut, February 18th. We'll get the show on before then. So February 18th, Elmwood Productions. I'll be emceeing that show. Yeah, I'd love to have you down there. Love to have you be a part of it.
See how I like to make sure that I'm promoting you more than I'm promoting myself?
I love it.
That's my legacy because even though I do everything because I love having, you know, I'm trying to write a book this year because I always wanted to put out a collection of poetries as well as put out maybe some spiritual ideas. Yeah. But I'd much rather be helping others, you know, collaborating with others. And maybe that's going to be my legacy because Athan Phynix Productions, we're all about being like the spirit of Jim Henson. You know, he loved working with people. He didn't mind when people had to go off and do their thing because now they were successful enough to direct or go out and produce. And I feel I'm the same way. I want to keep working with people like you and people like Don and help you guys. And so I would say that would probably be the best legacy I could give is to just help people express themselves, you know, artistically for the fun of it, the joy of it.
I think that's a great legacy. And I know we spoke about this before. Times has a way of slipping away, but I would love to get together, do a show with some of your friends, some of my friends, have like a 4 or 5 hour show, or rent out a hall, sell tickets, and just have a great time. I think it's getting a little bit better now. When you and I first started talking about it, there were still a lot of areas where you needed to wear a mask all the time, or they were just closed period. But now I think we should get something together this summer, and I'll definitely put some time aside. The place I was thinking about before, there was because of COVID, they really weren't doing it, and I was hoping they were going to open up. I'm not sure if they are now, but yeah, I think I love that legacy, and you've done so much. I've been on, I don't know how many different shows of yours. I've been Spiritual Hour once. You hosted my Mediator Stage feature act. We've performed together all the time. So yeah, and I've seen you help other people in the past as well. So, and I love the work you're doing. Keep up everything. And I love the fact you're just adding. I'll be the first one in line to buy that book as long as I get a signed copy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Give me at least a year to write it, but
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, this summer will be a lot easier to do a show. There's a few venues in Providence that I'd love to collaborate with you. So hopefully we can do that. You know, do a show, some of my friends and your friends in Connecticut, but then bring some of your friends down here to Providence,
Rhode Island. Great.
Because things are, thank goodness, things are starting to go back in the direction of life and moving forward. With life, because people need to enjoy it. That was the biggest tragedy of this last 2 years, as I always felt bad that, you never know when you're going to die, but I would hope the quality of life, is there for your last couple of weeks or months or years. And so I'm glad that things are starting to get back to the way they used to be, because, people need to enjoy the life that we are blessed to have.
I think that's the one good thing that happened because of this pandemic. I think most people in the past would say, hey, I'm too tired. Maybe I'll do it next time. Now people are realizing there might not be a next time. Let me do this now. Maybe the world will shut down again. I don't want to take a chance while we're still able to have fun. Let's do it. So I've been going to a lot of different shows lately, and every place I've been to has been packed. And I love that, because I think more and more people that would normally just sit in the couch and just say, you know what, they'll be around next year, are thinking, no, I don't want to miss this opportunity. And they're starting to take advantage of that free time that they have now, and use it for something where they can have more fun, and they don't want to miss out.
Yeah, exactly. That has been, and that's where I think we have to thank our parents, I guess. And we have to thank our lucky stars, because we have a healthy perspective. There's always, to every bad thing or negative thing or destructive thing, there's always a blessing hidden in there. And yeah, that definitely is true. People are out there really appreciating life now, because if they didn't realize before how precious life is, they certainly realize it now. And so that is a gift, that people are waking up to that you really got to enjoy. I don't know why I did that. Dirty joke for Bob Saget. We got to enjoy life.
All right. Well, you let me promote myself. February 18th, Elmwood Productions. Bernice 2 is the movie, Warner Theater in Torrington. So let me let you promote yourself now. So what's next, and where can people find you?
Thank you very much. The people should just follow me on Facebook, facebook.com, Athan Phynix, because I decided to take February off. Well, okay, here we go. Mediator Fellowship, Thursday night, 50 Rounds Avenue, Providence. Doors open at 7. I'm usually there every week, either performing or co-hosting with Don Tisoni. And I am going to be I'm going to try to do a Saturday night show once a month. I decided to take January and February off because in the past, those were poorly attended because, New England winter, you never know when you're going to get hit by a blizzard. But exactly. If they follow me on Facebook, or if they come to Spiritual Hour at 1:00, there'll be one show a month, but probably on the last, either the 3rd or 4th Saturday. I'm just going to be doing them at the Mediator Fellowship on Saturday night, like March 27th, April 28th, stuff like that. I was not prepared for this interview.
we spoke for 3 hours, so you were a little prepared. You did well if you weren't prepared. And remember, if you're looking for Athan on Facebook, it's spelled Athan, and Phoenix is Phynix. Nathan, or Ethan, all three of you, it was great to have you on the show, and you definitely have to come back. I look forward to seeing you one of your shows and you performing soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And you and your family be well. And there you go. Right.
That wraps up the latest episode of the Claws Corner. A huge thanks goes out to the extremely talented and hilarious Athan Phynix for being a guest on the Claws Corner. I would also like to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in every week. Enjoy your day, everyone.
All of a sudden I hear, brim, brim.
What's a diaphragm again?
Ha! We caught one.
They're supposed to be weird.
Oh, yeah, no. If you say so.
I've always wanted to be in a movie.
Around the